Good evening, everybody. Today is March 21st. This is a meeting of the Merrimack Village District Board of Commissioners. Public participation is being offered by webinar. You can join the webinar by going to mvdwater.org and downloading today's agenda for this meeting. And that has the web link that you can click on if you want to join the webinar. Or you can call 646-876-9923 and enter webinar ID 874-1279-3246. As a courtesy, Merrimack TV is also recording the meeting and will be posted on their website at a later date. So I'll call the meeting to order at 5:08 p.m. and can ask all of us to rise and conduct the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we have three commissioners here in the room. Ken Ayers on my right, John Lyons on my left, and myself, Don Preventure. We have two participating remotely. So I'm just going to have Wolf and Paul just do a roll call and tell us where they're calling in from. To start with Wolf.
This is Wolf von Schön. I'm in York, Pennsylvania at my employer in a conference room, and I am by myself.
Great.
I'm here for business. Here for business.
How you doing? Paul McLaughlin. I'm zooming in from my home at 326 Babusick Lake Road, and by myself with kids coming in and out of the room.
Sounds like fun. All right. So the regular session here, the first on the agenda is Board of Commissioners to review the Pennachuck Waterworks cost of service study. We have Don Ware here from Pennachuck Waterworks and also Larry Goodhue on the Zoom conference here, and he's from Pennachuck Waterworks as well. And we also have Keith Pratt from Underwood Engineers, who's our consulting engineer, and all of us have been involved in this. So I don't know if you have any comments or anything to start off with, Don, on this, or you just want to have questions?
No, we're here to answer your questions. We work collaboratively with Chris and the consultant, Raftelis, to develop some various scenarios for the cost of service study as requested by and funded by MVD. And so we're just here and to answer any questions that you might have relative to it, or whatever questions that again we've been working with Keith all along.
So a couple of the options that we were looking at is we have an interconnection right now over at Pennachuck Square. And that's physically limited to probably 1 million gallons a day based on pumping capacity there. Right now, we just have a retail agreement. We buy water for emergency purposes. Typically, obviously, at this point, we're in that reduced rate with the Public Utilities Commission, and that's going to stay in effect until hopefully through the end of the summer until we get all of our wells online. But we're talking about this is a wholesale agreement and what that would look like if we wanted to purchase water from Pennachuck. It would be at a lower rate than what we charge our customers. And there's a couple difference in rates depending on the volume that we're looking at and the location. There's another location where we could get more than 1 million gallons of water if we built a pump station down on DW Highway. Sort of over by the Budweiser plant or a little north of that.
Around the DOT garage.
Right. So that's what we're looking at. You sent over a couple of spreadsheets. I know Keith had plugged in some numbers in there, and the variables are the volume of water we're looking at and which location we will want to consider taking the water from. So I think, things are pretty straightforward. It was very helpful. The cost of service study, the spreadsheet was very helpful there. I had a few questions that I thought I would ask just for clarification. And I don't know if anybody else has anything, or if not, I could just start asking away and see what we go, where we go from there. So the first question I had is, would there be any limitation on the number of consecutive days or the season of the year that we could take the peak consumption volume? And I guess I'll predicate that in the information that I saw, what we would normally be asking for is an average day withdrawal over 365 days. And one example that was used was, I think it was a 450,000 average gallon per day wholesale request. So that would be an average of every day. But it looked like the agreement was written, or other agreements were written such that we could actually we could use peak flow of twice that amount.
Well, that would be your selection. So there are 4 parameters in a typical cost of service study. The first parameter is how much are you willing to guarantee? So you pick a number, and let's say that was 450,000 gallons a day times 365 days, whatever that comes out to, 160 million gallons a year. That's guaranteed, so that if you only purchased 120 million at the end of the year, you're going to be paying for 30 million that you did not use. That's parameter number 1. Parameter number 2 is what we call a guarantee. So that's a rate over 365 days a year that we need to make sure we will always provide. So our plant, has a certain capacity. And let's say you came and said, we want 36 million gallons a day. And we'd say, oops, well, we can't do that. We can't guarantee that. But you look at it, and basically you're reserving that plant capacity. So short of an emergency, a fire at the plant. We had one of those at one point. We're going to always ensure that we can, provide that amount of flow. Then there's what's called a max day. And that maximum day is that, at any one point that, let's say that was 2 million gallons a day. If you said we want 3, again, we're only going to tell you we can do 2. So we need to make sure that the delivery facilities are capable of meeting that maximum day, that 2 million gallons. And last of all is the peak hour. So, 2 million gallons a day, just shy of 1,400 gallons a minute. And if you said, well, there's times we're going to want for a period of a couple of hours. And again, this isn't a fire event. If there's some unique event or emergency, these parameters go away and we work together. But that maximum rate is typically what your pumps are sized at. So it's how much can they draw. So they might be set up to pump 1,800 gallons a minute instead of the 14 max day. So if you ran them all day long, you would exceed your max day. So when the Public Utilities Commissions look at this, you're buying parts and capacities of the plant that are sectioned off to meet average day, peak hour. And they're very specific when they actually, their engineering group will look at and make sure that the design is such that they always say, well, what's going to keep them from drawing 10,000 gallons a minute versus 1,800 gallons a minute. And that's where, the engineer like Keith will say, well, if we turn on the 2 pumps, all they can do is 1,800 gallons a minute. So they can never take more than that. Well, what's going to keep them from taking more than the average day? Well, it's metered, and we've got supervisory control and data acquisition. And it's meant short of a phone call that says, we have an emergency, 3 of our wells have gone up in smoke. We want more. Can you give us more? Yes. Other than that, when the meter hits that point where it's, hit the equivalent of 2 million gallons a day after 16 hours, it just shuts down. The clock resets, and at 12:01 the next day, it starts over again at 0. So there are engineering controls, and that's very important because these cost of service studies are set up to take plant and divide representative costs of that plant amongst the parties. So in this case, at present, we have our retail rate, which is divided and used by all of our customers. And then we have special contracts, and there are parameters for special contracts, which, say MVD would be, but with, only one customer within, who's a Penachuk customer, which is Anheuser-Busch. And then additionally, with the town of Hudson, with the town of Milford, and with the town of Tingsboro, Mass.
Oh.
And so they have contracts that were all established using the same methodology that you see here, where they step forward and say, these are what we want. And, based on your operating expenses and your capital investments, this is how those costs will be shared.
Right. So I guess I'm asking that because there's an email that Keith had put together, and it looked here, it says that there's a guaranteed annual take, in this case would be the 450,000 gallons per day. That's on average. Then there's the capacity reservation that you talked about of 900,000 gallons a day. And the maximum day and the peak hour are all listed here at 900,000 gallons. So it looks like this is essentially doubling the average take.
So what it would say is that under that scenario, that in any one day, maximum day, or even max hour, that your pumps aren't going to put out more than 900,000 gallons a
Right.
day, or roughly 630 gallons a minute.
Right.
What you're saying is that over a period of a year, 365 days, you're going to use, when you take 450,000 gallons a day times 365, you're going to guarantee that stream of revenue. So the revenue gets broken into two buckets: a fixed portion that you pay in theory, whether you use any water or not. And in this case, with the guaranteed take, whether you take any water or not, you're guaranteeing that purchase amount. Anything beyond there between 450,000 and 900,000 is at the volumetric rate that's there. And I think Keith had done it, he and I had discussed it, is looking at this as an all-in rate. So if you took just the 450,000 gallons a day, and that's what you bought, and you took the fixed fee into effect in the volumetric rate, what does your all-in rate look like? If you took the 900,000 gallons a day, your all-in fee is going to drop down, because that divides the fixed cost by a factor of 2. You're taking twice as much water. The volumetric rate's the same, but that fixed cost doesn't change, because that's made to recover, in particular, the capital investment in the raw water facilities and the treatment facilities.
So I guess on the extreme case, and I don't think we would necessarily do this, but would it be the same at the end of the year if we did 6 months at 900,000 gallons a day versus 450,000 gallons a day for 12 months?
So what happens is, if 1 month you use 0, we're still going to bill you as if you use 450,000 gallons a day, but there's a credit sitting out there. If the next month you use 900,000 and it was the same number of days, you're going to get billed at 900,000, but have a credit of 450,000. So you're only paying for 450. The credits do not carry over from 1 year to the next. So if you get to the end of the year and say we've only used 200,000 gallons, we want to carry it over to next year. That does not happen.
Right.
Typically, we structure these so that the beginning of the year is not a calendar year, but a fiscal year starting in September, with the idea that, over the winter months, you may not use as much. And so if you realize you have to catch up, it's during a time where the demand is actually there, as opposed to using a calendar year where you get through the summer and you haven't used as much. Now you're in your lower fall, winter months, and you can't take enough from us.
Yeah. Is that set that the year, the month that it turns over, is that?
We have a number of contracts, and different people wanted it to start at different times. Tingsboro wanted it to start September 1st. Hudson wanted it to start November 1st.
Right.
The first year, whatever it is what we'll call a stub year, because it's never the contract unless you line things up. It may start earlier. We work through those details.
Okay. All right.
Is there any data, like in the past years, how much during the summer we use from Penachuk?
We have some historic, yes, we have historic.
I was just wondering if, like, I mean, obviously the summer is the issue, then, like in your example, I was just curious if we had like an idea, like in the past couple of summers, especially the years when we had droughts, how much did we use from Penachuk for the summer months and kind of get a good idea of,
I think we have all that data,
Kevin, I can put something together and get it to the board.
right?
Maybe do what, like the last 5 years or something, or if
yeah, I mean,
So that was my main question was because we may not need all of the 450,000 gallons a day in the dead of the winter, but we may need more than that for some periods in the summer.
As long as it doesn't go over the 900,000, it's fine. If you said I gotta ramp up, and I want to go to 1.5 million and because that's what I need.
Yeah.
Then you're over the 900,000. So there are the parameters that are established. We'll never give you more under this than the 900,000 unless you have a emergency.
Right.
And there's always that language that's in all these contracts.
Right. Okay.
Is there anything for you as a supplier on the side if there's a drought and you're short supply?
So again, that would be, when you're talking a real drought, but by example, in 2016, we draw from the Merrimack River. We're allowed 5% of the capacity of the Merrimack. The plant's good for 35 million gallons a day. Right now, delivery from the Merrimack River up is 22 million gallons a day. And a safe yield that year out of Penachuk Brook was about 9 million gallons. We're good for around 31, 32 million gallons a day. That's all taken into effect. So if it was an utter drought and the Merrimack dried up, you would experience just like when you put on more restrictive, restrictions, we abide by them, or our customers are supposed to abide by them up in Bedford and Cabot Preserve. Same thing here. We have never had, in my time, any outside usage restrictions. In 2016, the state asked us to put voluntary restrictions. We had no shortage of water, but they wanted, okay, everybody's
Prudent,
looking at you, at least put on voluntary restrictions, because everybody drives into Nashua. And same with Manchester that year. The sprinklers are all going every day, 10 times a day, and it doesn't look good. So we put them on, but we didn't have to. We had adequate capacity in that year, 2016 into 17.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dawn, can I ask a question? So I know one of the board members or the board had asked me this before. I guess maybe I want to make sure I did answer it right. But you're talking about unlikely scenarios because of the way you're set up, which is great. But in that unlikely scenario, is the contract set up that the supply to Merrimack would proportionally drop the same as anything to Penachuk? In other words, we're not cutting Merrimack off with agreements like this before, right?
Everybody gets treated equally in these contracts.
Yeah,
In other words,
okay,
we're
thank
not going to impose restrictions on Merrimack
And still have
and
irrigation.
still have
on,
it going in
yeah.
Nashua. So with the same level of restrictions that are in the Nashua core would be applied to all of the wholesale customers as well. None of the contracts are set up. You go first, we go second.
It's all equitable.
Right, but we need to make sure the reverse would be horrible. If we said, well, you get the 1 million, but by the way, we're going to go to restrictions
Right.
in Nashua so you can have the 1 million. So the
Yeah.
language of the contracts reflect that.
Okay. All right. So I guess what I'm hearing, just to be clear, is there really is no limitation on, taking that. If we, with the 450,000 average day, if we needed the 900,000 consecutive days, months.
If you took that for
There's really no-
6 months, that would fit within the context of
the agreement.
Of the agreement.
Okay. And that's what I was reading.
Yeah.
Just wanted to confirm I was understanding it correctly. If we did go over that, the cumulative, whatever, 100 and something million gallons, that what the 450 over 365 days a year. Let's say we had a month left to go and we already reached that limit, but we still needed water. What rate would we get? It would be the retail rate?
Same, anything between 450 and 900,000 gallons a day. So you could take 900,000 gallons a day 365 days a year, you haven't exceeded the maximum amount, and you're paying the same rate that was structured as that 450,000 gallons a day. So that rate doesn't change. Now, if you went over 900,000 gallons a day, of course, long before you got there, we'd be knocking on the door and say, you know what? You've got a max day of 900,000. You've been pulling that. We're now in, month 11 and you're at 915,000 gallons a day. We're going to have to shut you off, because we're not going to let you go over 900,000 gallons a day. But anything between 450 and 900,000 is at the volumetric rate that's there. Your fixed charge doesn't change. So in many respects, between 450 and 900, what you're doing is you're reducing the blended, the overall cost, which is the fixed plus the volumetric divided by the total volume used.
Okay, so
That's a big range.
That offers us a lot of flexibility.
yeah, I'm not sure if I'm understanding that correctly, but
We can go to
Well,
900 a day for the whole year and still pay the same rate. That's the
All right,
max.
so the fixed rate isn't going to change. So let's say the fixed rate was $450,000 and your volumetric rate was $1.10. So if you use 450,000 gallons a day average over the year, you're going to pay the $450, $1 a gallon effectively, plus the $1.10 time for the volume used, and it's going to run out to $2.10. If you use 900,000, you're still going to pay the $450, but you're going to pay 900,000 at the $1.10. So in that case, that fixed charge, instead of being $1, is now 50 cents. So your all-in cost is the $1.10 plus 50. So as you stay within that range, once you go over 450, you continue to pay that volumetric rate on any use over the 450. You're guaranteeing you're going to purchase that amount. You
okay,
don't have to buy anything more than that, but you need to buy at least that amount.
and we can buy more then. If
You can buy more up to the maximum day that the
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is if we go into an agreement with 450,000 gallons a day.
And let me cover it. It's because you're asking for the reservation. So you have a reservation. So 450 is the average. You're saying, give us 900,000 and our max day is 900,000. The target number is, the cap is the reservation number. So if you said 450, I want to reserve 750, but I want a max day of 900,000, your fixed pricing would change a little because you're using different components, but yours are all the same. So in this case, the range is fully from 450 to 900,000. You're paying the same volumetric rate on usage, and the fixed charge is not changing. The fixed
Right.
charge is the fixed charge.
So the more.
So in other words,
the cheaper it is.
Yes.
So in other words, one day you're doing 450,000, but then next day you're doing 600, it's the same rate.
Yeah, but I'm saying, once you get to the end of the calendar year, and if there's a cap, is there a cap on the volumetric we can use in a year?
Well, it's that 9, because you've reserved, again, what makes it a little different, the conversation, you've reserved 900,000. That means we have the
All right,
plant
all right,
capacity to
okay.
deliver 900,000. You want to take 900,000 gallons a day, which is, it's rare to have somebody say our peak is, our max day is the same as our reservation for the year, because you're paying to set aside 900,000 gallons out of a capacity of roughly 32.9 million gallons. But we're looking at that and saying, all right, we've got to make sure that we can deliver that other than, extreme emergency conditions.
Okay. So there's not a cap on the total amount of water we can take in a year. It's that cap is related to the 900,000. It's not related to the 450.
Correct.
All right, that's what I was, that's.
Yeah,
that's what I
Can I
understand.
offer this up? What's most important, I think, for the commissioners to really kind of hone in with Keith's assistance is, what's your real need? Okay, what's
Yeah.
your real need? And then when are you going to use that need within the year, Commissioner? Okay, so, you're talking 450. If that's your average that you're going to average throughout the year, and you're going to use most of it in the summer and you're not going to in the winter months, maybe that's the right numbers. But you got to determine what the right guardrails are. What's that good average and what's that good peak? Because that peak is what you're paying for relative to the reservation of capacity at our plant. And that's the cost of service study is really going to be looking at relative to the allocation of costs that allows a rate to be determined for you guys to pay for both the fixed and the volumetric charges.
And that peak is actually a daily total, not an average, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's where the
You know-
engineering controls come in that we talked about, so it's something that says if you've said our maximum day is 900,000 gallons, again, short of the dive emergency, we're gonna look for Keith to have a design in there that when the meter hits 900,000 gallons a day, whatever time of day it is, wherever your storage is, the pump shuts down until 12 AM the next day.
And you know, what's really important there too is you don't want to make an investment in capital that is far in excess of what you need for your pumping capacity needs. Okay, so Keith's going to design a station that's going to be able to meet that peak day, but also run efficiently at that average day. And then, that's part of what we're looking at, the allocation of costs as far as that reservation of capacity. And what you're sharing in is the infrastructure that we've invested in to make sure that we can provide that capacity to all of our customers, including you in a wholesale contract.
Right. You guys have a hard stop at 5:45, is that?
I'm here as long as you
Oh, you're
want me
good.
here for.
I can stay till about 10 minutes of 6. I think Keith had a 5:45 hard stop, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Keith,
that's a-
okay, yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Well, is there anything that you want to ask Keith, since you only got about 10 or 12 minutes before you need to cut out?
I don't, other than Dawn, we can play with some numbers on your spreadsheet by changing the capacity reservation max day. We already did some of that, but we can do it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And I think the reason we sort of kept the capacity reservation, the max day the same, was because because we have so many sources, and we can certainly make some decisions, Dawn, about what's best here. But 2 points maybe, and they're not really questions, maybe one's a point, one's a question, but I know we do need to work with you, Dawn, on the board to figure out what it is we'd land on, whether it's 450 or 1 million or whatever. And that's important. And we have the scenarios here, but this maybe is partly a question to you, Dawn or Larry, and we can play with these numbers, but the capacity reservation, I would suspect, is that going to have a big impact on the cost of service, because that becomes sort of a max day number or a peak hour number? If that went up, is that, not knowing the cost of service details, maybe like you do, does that have a pretty significant impact? Like, which one of these components, these 4 components, are most impactful to the cost?
Well, they without sounding odd, they're all impactful, Keith. So because the variable cost of production, so the fixed costs are spread in the fixed charge, but also down in the volumetric rate. And that's why there's the guaranteed minimum, is that we have to know that we're going to recover that, so if you don't buy enough volume, then we've got fixed costs that are hung up there. But if you put them all up in the fixed charge, that number looks very big. So, again, there's a process that's followed by Raftellus based on how our rate structure is set up, based on where the Public Utilities Commission is, that's how things are broken up. So if you were, for instance, to change nothing else and said, we're going to guarantee you 900,000 gallons a day, and everything else changed the same, 900, 900, 900, 900, your volumetric rate's going to go half or close to half, because not all of the, part of the volumetric is fixed and part of it is truly the variable costs, chemicals, power, and whatnot. So about half of your volumetric rate is tied up with fixed. So if you double your guarantee, you're probably taking that half and cutting it in half. So you end up at 75 cents on the dollar, if you will. So, the fixed amount is very, very important. The closer or more approximate, the broader your span, if you said, I'm going to guarantee 100,000 gallons a day, but I want a max day of 2 million gallons a day, and I want a peak hour of 3 million gallons a day, you're the worst kind of customer. We know when you're using it, you're going to be peaking on us when everything's going crazy.
Yeah.
And so the closer the 4 numbers are, in a perfect world, your best number would be if everything was identical.
Right.
Of course, that gives you no flexibility either. So then you start to manage accordingly as Larry indicated, is in particular, if you can keep from peaking, in other words, don't go from your max day to your, peak, to your peak hour being a big jump. Keep those roughly the same. The closer, again, your plant capacity is to your maximum or to your guaranteed minimum take, those things help bring the price down. So kind of the peak hour, max day play in the sandbox together, the minimum take and the plant reservation play in the box together. And there's some crossover between the reservation and the max day. Normally don't do what most communities don't spread that. For a long time. We had a contract with Hudson, and the pricing reflected it, is that they wanted to be able to take 2.1 million gallons a day in the summer and nothing at all in the winter and no guarantee. So, and they wanted 2.1 million whenever they wanted it. And if they didn't want it, they didn't want it. And so that, that was kind of the customer. It's like, okay, so we need to have 2.1 sitting on the shelf all the time
Right.
in the middle of the summer so you can have it. We can't say, well, it's a blazing hot day. We're not going to give you your 2.1 million. So anyways, that's the, so again, Keith, long answer to a short question, pick the numbers that you think you can, if you're interested, how much do you feel comfortable guaranteeing? Don't stretch way out on your peak numbers beyond that. Try to look at that. Well, if I average it, if I income average my stock purchases, if I income average my purchase water purchases, try to keep them close.
Well, I think we've been looking at 500,000 gallons for a couple of years, and that's based on studies that Keith has done. But that's on an average annual basis, I think.
Yeah, it was.
I know
And
Keith only got a couple more minutes, but one thing I'd like to mention too is, you're looking at what is probably the right numbers, okay? Pursuant to this cost of service study, we're going to be going to the PUC to get them to approve a special contract. One of the other things you're going to want to look at is what's the duration of that contract? Because there's always the opportunity, say it's a 2-year contract and you've spent money on cost of service study, you got to amortize that. But you might be able to then say, okay, at the end of 2 years, we have better data as to what our real needs are, and we'd like to now do a renewal at a different level. It does restart the process, so you want to be as precise as you can on the front end, but that's another metric that you can use in the process to really determine the right amounts that you want to be contracted to.
So typically, and again, it's a challenge. In the past, Anheuser-Busch, actually the town of Hudson, the town of Milford had 20-year contracts with 10-year renewals. They obviously get out there, they're a little long, they don't give a lot of flexibility. With Tingsboro, because again, just like yourselves, there are alternates to consider. Why do we want to give you a better rate than a retail rate? Well, because we have capacity that we'd like to have you share in, but you're not paying the same as the retail customer. But if nobody's there, it's like the unfilled plane, seat on the plane. There's no cost other than peanuts and a Coke to put somebody in that seat. So suddenly, as you get right around the time the plane's ready to take off, the price drops because they want to put somebody in the seat. They'd rather have somebody fly for $100 than $400 because they're going to get $99 out of it. Same thing here. We currently have, and it's carefully looked at, the PUC always asks it, would you really have the capacity? Or someday you're going to be saying, well, we're out of capacity. We got to build on the plant and our customers are going to have to pay for it.
Make all kinds of investments.
Right. So very careful to that end. But to that end, typically, so in the case of Tingsboro, they're a 3-year contract with 3-year extensions. So the extensions are automatic unless one party or the other says we have reason. And in fact, it's Tingsboro who would have to call in the card and say, we're done.
Yeah.
We want to renegotiate. Hudson is 3 years with 3 years because they're looking at their alternatives. They lost a couple of their wells due to PFOA contamination. Well, they need time to evaluate the options. You look at how long, you took you to reach this point. They're just starting that road.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So Don, Keith's only got a couple more minutes. Was there something else, Keith, that you had?
I just had one other, and this is just a point as a reminder for the board, and Dawn, you'll remember because I asked you to do it, but when Dawn originally put the cost of service together with Raftellus, he had absorbed, there's capital costs associated with this. The connection at DW Highway is not, it's not physically there. There's a pump and pipe that's required. So right now, the way, I think, Dawn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the way it's set up is that that capital cost would have to be borne by the district, and the long-term operating for that pump would be borne
Yes.
by the district. They offered it initially the other way. They wrapped the cost of service to include the construction and operation of that. I presumed you didn't want to do that, but this was just a reminder that there's flexibility there, but also that there is a capital cost associated to making
Right.
this happen on top of the cost of service and rates that Pennachuck's offering.
So whatever the cost of that connection on the DW highway, because it's exclusively to your benefit, you would pay for it. Now, in previous contracts, Milford said, we don't want to go for a bond. You put it into the rates and we're all set. You know, but the fact is that, you know, your cost to capital versus our cost of capital to satisfy the banks, we had 10% on top of the principal and interest that we're paying on the investment. So that means if you're paying for 100% of it, you're paying an additional 10% above the principal and interest. Additionally, if we own the facilities and say it was $1 million, they're subject to the statewide property tax, which between Merrimack and the state is a little over $30 a thousand valuation. So it's $30,000 in operating expenses that if we own it, that you would have to be incorporated in your rate. If you own it, you don't have to pay those taxes. You have a better financing rate. So when we looked at this again, we just said, okay, we're going to assume if you want to go to that end, that you're going to take care of all the connection stuff. So we have a starting point that, you know,
All right.
it's this point plus whatever our, you know, carrying cost of that investment and the operation and maintenance of that investment is.
All right, that's good to know. That's an important thing because we were thinking it could be either way and it's just going to break out the way it shows in the spreadsheet. But yeah, I understand that that's different situation then.
So is that only if it's over 1 million? Is Continental a source if it's up to 1 million?
So Continental, we've got, you know, about 1 million gallons a day capacity there on top of where Milford is, on top of where that system is, on top of what we can deliver out there.
So if that's our peak, we don't have to worry about building.
Correct.
Yeah, the pump station that's there is already capable of 1 million gallons a day.
Okay.
So if the 900,000 peak scenario, we should be able to meet everything we already have.
I got you.
Yeah, yeah. I think if we wanted more than 1 million,
You would have to go.
we have to go and build a station on.
Or you'd have to so you'd have to improve your own station. And then
Right.
we'd actually have to upsize some of the infrastructure delivering
To
from the plant
Yeah,
out towards Amherst.
I see. All right, that was one of my questions was the term, and it sounds like we can negotiate a term and renewals. It sounds like they were 3-year.
Yeah, that's as short as we've seen
Yeah.
and, you know, the commission did approve that. I mean, all this, although is, you know, we end up filing a petition with the Public Utilities Commission. They ultimately go through the cost of service study and make sure that all the costs are properly allocated. Again, with the goal that both parties are carrying their own weight. You know, we're not in a scenario where we're looking to make a profit. You're not in a scenario where you're looking, you know, to take advantage. So the commission is, and the Department of Energy staff are there to make sure that everything is done the way it should be, which is the way this is laid out. They always find a little here, a little there. Why didn't you allocate this cost? Why did you allocate that cost?
So you mentioned one town had a 20-year agreement.
Yes.
Does the rate stay, it doesn't stay the
No,
same for
so
20
each
years, right?
rate case, so this volumetric base, so there's two parts. There's a fixed charge that does not change for the duration of the contract
Okay,
unless it reads in there, we have to make improvements to the supply facility. So if the Safe Drinking Water Act changes and EPA says that the levels of PFAS for PFOA are now 2 parts per trillion instead of 12, we would have to put on tertiary filters in
Yeah.
order to ensure that $50 million investment. At that stage, go back, look at all your contracts, and that fixed charge would change ratably amongst all parties. The volumetric rate changes at each rate case. So that, or each time our rates change. So, you know, if we're having a 3 or 3.5% or 4%, you know, a year change in rates, the volumetric rate's gonna go up. Now,
All right.
so that changes, the fixed charge does not. Every time you come back and do a whole new contract, which is where we are right now with Anheuser-Busch, Milford and Hudson. So, you know, everybody's in there at once. So it's good because everybody's defined their needs so that they aren't changing. You think you divided the pie this way,
Yeah.
and then somebody comes along 2 years later and they're dividing the pie differently. The pie is still the pie, but everybody shares. So this is kind of a unique confluence of times. So in this case, again, we're going to divide that pie as it exists, the 32 million gallon a day plant capable of meeting today's standards. If today's standards don't change or the plant can still meet those standards and everything works, then that fixed charge doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the volumetric rate.
So basically, at the end of the term, it's all renegotiated freshly, right? Okay.
Another cost of service study would be required. So when, again, we did a cost of service study for Anheuser-Busch, one for Hudson, one for Milford, since their contracts are coming up and they'll be submitted as part of the petition in support for the special contract that's being sought.
So both Keith and I need to bow out at this juncture, gentlemen. Is there anything further you had for Keith or for me? If not, I'm sure Don can address just about any questions you have.
Yeah, I got about
Oh.
1 minute myself.
Yeah.
So,
No, any
All set,
other
guys. Have a good night.
last statements or anything before you leave, or you're all set? You got
No,
everything?
you know, I guess as I said, the biggest thing is you guys have got to determine what your need is and work with Keith in getting that guidance, because it's going to make a determination as to what is proper for you guys. You're
Yeah.
never going to get it exactly right, but you want to get it as close to right as possible.
Right, great.
Yep,
Okay?
Thanks,
I don't have-
everybody.
I don't have anything to add to. Thank you, guys, and we'll
Thanks, Keith.
follow up, Don. Yep. Good night.
Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
So I think I had the 4 or 5 questions. I think we've actually answered all of them here. So I don't know. I feel like I'm doing all the questions.
No,
Everybody else.
Oh, you could-
I just
Great job.
I just kind of.
Smarter than when I walked in.
It was like during the summer.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I.
I understood it pretty well at this point.
Okay.
Did you want to take some time now and talk about the PFOA?
Yeah, sure. Just want to make sure Paul and Wolf don't have any questions on the cost of service study. If not, we're probably going to be,
No, I'm all clear.
okay,
Yeah, same here. You guys answered it all.
great. Anybody else? Ron? No?
No, I'm good.
Good. I don't want to feel like I'm kind of taking over the conversation, that's all, but it might seem that way a lot.
Good chance now.
Yeah, right. It's been working so far. Yeah, so,
What I'd like to do is in preparation for this, I pulled together, we've been sampling on a monthly basis, not only from our raw water supplies, but our finished water supply. And since 2016, and what I have here is the data on a monthly basis. And again, as we all know, we'd love to, at this stage, we'd love to have an online PFOA monitor, maybe not.
yeah,
You know, because you take a sample and you don't know for 3 weeks where you are.
right.
And because we have a lot of toggles, we have 2 different supplies, the Merrimack River, which historically has PFOA levels in the non-detect as high as 6,
Right,
and Pennachuck Brook, which will get as low as 2 or 3 and be as high as 35 to 40.
right.
The same water you're seeing at wells 7 and 8.
Yeah, because that Witch's Brook is a tributary and that's right near well 7 and 8.
So, you know, depending upon how you mix those supplies, they can come in independently or they can be mixed, and how much you're taking of both. And ultimately, more importantly, is age of carbon. And our carbon is not designed specifically for PFOA removal. It is a, one size fits all. So when it's removing PFOA, it's also removing organics that may be coming in from the river or from Pennachuck Brook. So there's a lot of variability, and unlike your filters, which are designed, as I mentioned, if there was a hard, fast, acute standard, we would have to put in tertiary filters that had a lead lag. So when we saw a breakthrough on the lead, we would take the lag and make it the lead and change out the media. So back when the standard was finally became official, we changed out all our carbon beds over 18 months so that they were staggered. So we have 12 beds of carbon. We did 4 at each time. And so, again, if I could get 5 copies, 6 copies, then we can all look at the same thing. But as she's running that off, when we put in the fresh carbon, you saw non-detect coming off of the fresh carbon. The older carbon before it was changed out, what went in came out.
Huh.
And then we started looking at, obviously, if you're putting 3 in, it uses less than if you're putting 30 in.
Sure.
So you're starting to look at this and saying, okay, well, how much of the water that was at 30 did we use? How much at 3? But then we don't know in between, because we've seen 30 go to 40 in 1 month and 30 go to 20 in another. So it's a little bit of, how's it going? So what happened was we saw the first breakthrough on the carbon put in late 2019 in the fall of last year. It went from 12 going in, say if it was a mix, to 12 coming out. And it was literally over a month. It went from,
Oh, really?
yeah, it was very quick.
So it was a really sharp
Right,
breakthrough.
but you still had 4 other filters that were still, they were staggered 6 months apart. So last fall, December, the second group of filters, even though it went on 6 months later, 2 months later, it was passing everything through. In February, the last of the filters that went online with new carbon was passing everything through. And that happened to be the time that we were on, a mix of Merrimack River water and Pennachuck Brook water. So again, looking at this, you'll see the data. We had that period of time where our distribution entry point hit 12. But typically, when all the carbon was working right fresh out of the box, and again, it's like I said, the first carbon went in the winter of 2019. So if you look at the second page, but use the first page so you have the headers. This will give you a complete history, but again, if you want to look at the history, when we started monitoring for this in 2016, look at the far right. What I say is quarterly average. That is, when I say quarterly average, that's the preceding 3 months, since we're taking monthly samples. So that's just a rollover. So you can see, in 2016, we were in the 2, 3, 4, and it got all the way up at different points at 15 or so in 2018, and again, at that stage, we weren't managing to treat for PFOA.
And the MCL wasn't even
And
established.
Pennachuck Brook was really the exclude. We only use the Merrimack River during the summer months to supplement Pennachuck Brook. We pay $400,000+ a year to pump water up from the Merrimack River. From Pennachuck Brook, it flows by gravity. So
Yeah.
it was always the weapon of choice, so to speak. When we started to see that when the standard, they started talking about it, and as you know, it bounced, well, maybe 30, maybe 40, you're kind of watching. And then when they came out with 12, they said, ooh, okay, we now have a source that we know without any treatment is going to exceed the standard if it's used on its own. We also have a source that without any treatment in 5 years of record has never exceeded 6. So you're saying, all right, we're going to start to use the Merrimack River, but we're going to have carbon that we're going to use as the backup, the cleanup. We can't use the Merrimack River, and we have to use Pennachuck Brook. The carbon will be there. what we're in the process of learning is that carbon is not just removing PFOA, PFAS, PFOS, it's removing organics. The Merrimack River has a lot more organics in many days than Pennachuck Brook. And so the treatment load on that, and that's why as we became more reliant on the Merrimack River, I think we saw that quicker breakthrough on the filters changed out later. And so we got ourselves, for lack of a better term, at a point where we expected those remaining 2 filters to last into the summer of this year and the fall of this year, and they were fully exhausted. And it was February, and we had what's called frazzle ice. So when you withdraw water that's very cold, as you increase the velocity, the pressure drops as it enters the screen, and it actually turns to little ice particles.
Oh.
Those ice particles have an affinity for solids. So you got this nice screen. They start affixing to the screen. Well, as they affix to the screen, now you have less area and the velocity gets even greater. And even though we're 30 feet down in the Merrimack River, there are periods of time that the river water's cold enough that we get this formation of frazzle ice, and so we have to stop withdrawing. So in that case, that happened. We drew exclusively from Pennachuck Brook, that at the time, 3 weeks after we were drawing, had levels of 30 coming in. We started that in January, and if you look at the second page, what's interesting you can see is that if we look at the sample finished water taken 12/6, and I don't know, I must have taken out by you can see that the PFOA was 3.23. If you look at the fourth column over, that's the finished water results. And it was a 3.23, average with the ones up above. Now, again, in September, if you look back at September, the finished water was 11.6. I would have to look at that and see what went on, but I suspect at that stage, we had a heavier mix of Pennachuck Brook water because it was during the summer. We were still getting in. So originally the Merrimack River only had the equivalent of 1 pump capable of 12 million gallons a day. So when you had 25 million gallons a day, 13 was coming from Pennachuck Brook.
Oh.
We now have 3 pumps in there, any 2 of which will give us 22 million gallons a day, which is the limit of the pipeline coming up from there. If we wanted to get the full capacity of the plant, we'd have to replace 4 or 5 miles with a pipeline.
Wow.
So it becomes a matter of, do we want to change out carbon more frequently? Where are we going to go with this? But long story short, generally, if you look at the far right, which is the way we've kind of controlled things, so that you look at the quarterly average, which is, again, the 3 preceding month samples, from early 2020, after we had put in all the fresh carbon, we dropped from 5 to 4, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1.49. Well, that's a non-detect. Why is it there? Because we had a series of non-detects, or what I've called 0. And I put 0 in there because if you try to create a formula with a non-detect in it, it throws out an error. So I just put in 0 as the average. You can see 2, 2, 5, 1, 4, 1, 9. And so 2020, fresh beds of carbon, all of them, no matter where we were taking water from. Although, again, there was a constant, our goal is to take as much from the Merrimack River as possible because we don't have to remove as much PFOA. Now, that being said, what we're learning is, if
Organics.
the organics are going to compete, where's the balance point? Because that carbon, to change out all the carbon, right now, we just got a price from Calgon is looking at about $1.8 million. So, we want to extend its life as much as possible. When it was exclusively for taste and odor, which is a subset of organics, we got about 7 years life out of it.
Wow.
Here we're looking at what appears to be on the, the short side around 21 months, on the long side about 24 months.
Wow. Right.
And so can we manage differently? Where that's one of the things the water treatment plant's going to, they're doing more work. They're working with the carbon folks and looking at absorption and taking core samples. So that ultimately we want to stretch the life of that carbon. We're doing more organic sampling of the two sources of supply on, which you can get a more instantaneous result rather than, waiting 3 weeks to get the results from PFOA. What happened in those interim 3 weeks? What we've seen is the Merrimack River is pretty steady. Non-detect 3, 4, 5, where Pennachuck Brook, we've seen as low as 3 or 4 and as high as north of 40.
Right.
And, the solution to pollution is dilution. The more water that's flowing, I don't think the input from what I believe likely is TCI is changing.
Right.
But the amount of flow in the brook does.
Yeah.
And so if there's more flow, we've typically seen lower levels, not
Right.
typically, we've seen lower levels of PFOA when there are higher flows. As the summer goes on and the flows drop off, the levels of PFOA come up. Historically, they've been higher towards the end of the summer, which is also the time that the demands get higher.
Sure. Right.
Late August, early September, everybody's giving it the last hurrah. But so we are learning, but again, I think, the story is if you look at that running, average, including if you notice our last sample taken February 22nd was at 12.
Yeah. Right on the.
Right on the nose.
Yeah.
But
your running average is
if we
still
took just the last 3 weeks, forget the last 3 months, excuse me, which was a 492, or excuse me, a 612, a 323, and a 12 gave us the 476. So the highest time frame was actually the sample taken in November at 8.13. If we took the 3 monthly samples before that, which was the 612, the 492, and the 11.6. And we do have, and in fact, like I said, the original plan was to replace the original 4 filters in this spring, the next 4 filters in the fall, and the last 4 filters next spring. They're all being done this spring because they're all exhausted.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
While we've been taking these samples, we have been taking samples after the filters. So we've been able to watch those filters performance. There's the breakthrough. Okay, it took 24 months. That means it's another 6 months till this next one breaks through. Wasn't the case. It's another 12 months, even shorter. It was like how quickly it went, from, I'm guessing, because when I see this 11.6, so probably September, we broke through that first set of filters. And then we know we broke through, in the end, in February, but it was both at the same time of the remaining sets of filters. So they're all going to be replaced. We're currently working with Calgon to do that. And again, the goal is to manage this. Is none of us is comfortable, even though it's a quarterly 4 running average, none of us wants to see any close to 12. We will never be non-detect on a regular basis.
Right.
There's always going to be a background level of 3 or 4, unless the EPA comes out and says it's good, because we can now detect down to, half a part per trillion. You now have to be at, 1 part per trillion for the standard, in which case we're going to be investing whatever, $50 million to put in separate lead lag exclusively PFOA filters after the carbon filters.
Right. Okay. Do you sample, you said you have 12 beds and they're
Yes.
grouped in
Yep.
thirds?
Yes.
Are you collecting one sample from each of the 4 beds, or are you collecting a sample from each bed?
No, so the way the flow works is, it distributes evenly amongst all of them, unless you shut off a gate. Hydraulically, they're set up, they're meters, and there are
So all
pack-
12 beds are getting
get
fed?
the exact same flow rate.
Okay.
And so, we're taking it off of, one of the 4 beds, one of the 4 beds, one of the
Yeah.
4 beds. Obviously, whatever it's costing us now, $300-400. I've lost track of it.
Right.
You know, we want to limit the samples. We don't want to, but we want to get enough information. We feel, like I said, we're taking every month raw water Pennachuck Brook, raw water Merrimack River, the blend before treatment, the after treatment from each of the individual filters, and the blend thereof. Because if you saw the initial breakthrough when you had 12 coming through 1 and 0 and 0, that was a 3, or excuse me, a 4 total, because it was a
right.
third, and a third.
That's what I was asking, because you would only know if it's one bed that's having the problem.
Now they're because they're uniformly loaded. There are self-modulating valves that the operators put in the flow rate. So if there's 12 million coming in, there's 1 million going to each bed. So one of the things our engineering staff is doing is they're going back and looking at the number of gallons that went through each filter. And they, of course, they have to take monthly PFOA data and try to calculate the numbers of gallons of PFOA. So it would be gallons per PT. So, how much did a filter remove? But we don't know the competing organics.
Yeah, because those could be.
Right. And we also don't know what's been happening with the PFOA between those monthly samples. So you're taking a snapshot and say that's represented for the next month. If I put 30 parts per trillion in and I put 10 million gallons in, that would be 30 million gallons PPT. And we want to try to project or predict. And we're going to start taking the organics and put that in the sum and see what the impact is. Once we know that, we'll have an idea of the expected length of the carbon, which is going to, again, vary dependent upon the raw constituents that we're asking the carbon to work with.
Okay.
Ideally, we'd like to get back to a stagger, figure that out, so that, typically in the winter months, those filters are capable of 35 million gallons a day. If I only need 10 million gallons a day, and I've got to go exclusively to Pennachuck Brook, and I've got some exhausted filters, just shut them down and, put it through the filters that are good for 20, for 10. Yeah, you're putting more loading on, but you're going to get
Your effluent.
0, right?
Yeah.
Going to keep the effluent down.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is good to know. I mean, when we discussed previously about the temporary PUC rate and everything, we noticed our customers and told them that, because our well water was not compliant. Only wells 4 and 5 were the only ones that were treated, but the rest of our wells were not compliant. So the blend in some areas of the distribution system was over 12.
Yeah.
Up in the north end of town, which is primarily influenced by wells 4 and 5, was pretty much non-detect up there.
Right.
So we wanted to notify our customers once we started getting water from your system, as we're doing now. The reason was so that even though, as far as the DES compliance issue, we're still compliant because we're still in the testing period, the 4 quarterly running average. But obviously it's good practice to serve water that is.
We don't want to depend upon a quarterly 4 running average to have a period that's 1 quarter that's high, the other 3 quarters that are low. Meets the criteria, you can get into the discussion. It's a chronic contaminant. They're looking at 70, drinking it for 70 years, 2 liters a day. And so if you have, that's why they do the quarterly averaging. And I'll use as an example. So we all, if you follow that criteria, as people may or may not be aware, Manchester Water uses what are called chloramines for the disinfection, because they could not meet the disinfection byproduct rules, in particular using straight chlorine for total triallomethanes. But chloramines is a weaker disinfectant, and over time you build up a biofilm inside your water mains and you start to have problems with what's called nitrification.
Yeah.
And so over the winter, the nitrification reached a level, there were excess bacteria hits, they were not E. coli hits, levels of nitrates were going up, approaching the standard.
Wow.
Manchester went to a free chlorine burn. They converted from chloramines to chlorine for 4 months. Totally, got rid of the biofilm. We saw residuals gradually climb, and as the biofilm disappeared, the level of chlorine stabilized. did exactly what it's supposed to, but also our first quarter sample for total trialmethanes was 88, the standard's 80. But it's a 4-quarter running average.
This is Manchester.
This is
Yeah.
where we buy water from Manchester over in Londonderry.
Oh, all right, because you're saying we, I'm trying to make
Right,
sure.
so my example here is that, the state didn't, and it is they didn't say, go out and notify, you had a quarter at 88, because the other 3
a
quarters
running
were
average,
0.
yeah.
And so it was 22, if we stayed at 88, but they made a knowing change
Right.
for other reasons. And again, professionally, they had to do that. Otherwise, there were going to be bacterial issues, which is much more critical.
I did hear that, and it was actually on WMUR that they switched to chlorine.
Right. And they've just
Caught
switched
my
back to
attention.
chloramines. They did it once before in 2013. What they've learned is that I think they waited a little too long, that this may be a process they do every 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Because for the last 2 years, their outer parts of their system and where we purchase water from them, Dairy purchases water from them, Salem purchases water. The effect of the buildup of biofilm, the bacteria that were being generated while not E. coli, you're getting lots of too numerous to count.
Wow.
And the nitrate levels were, and that is a regulated contaminant, were going up. They had to do this, and that again, it worked perfectly. The chlorine's power enough disinfectant, it broke down that biofilm over time till there was none left.
Yep.
Got rid of any of the nitrifying bacteria that were converting, the nitrogen from the chloramines and giving off effectively, I don't know what the technical term, you might know it, John, but they were, when they consume the ammonia, they were releasing the nitrogen. So the bacteria consumed the ammonia associated with chloramines, but the nitrogen was left over that made its way into the water in the form of nitrate, nitrate.
Yeah.
The long story short, our goal ultimately is to manage this, so that we don't want to see a quarterly average of 12. In fact, when our lab tech called me, says, I can't believe this. He said, last month we were at 3.23, we're at 12.0 this month.
And that's why I wanted to just bring this to the discussion, because, we sample our distribution system, and we did take a sample of the incoming water, and we also noticed it was 12, I think it was 13 or something, or one of the, so that's within the tolerance of a lab sample.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
tolerance of lab sample, and again, there's so many things that can contaminate this. If you read the regulations, you should be wearing a burlap suit. Nothing that could possibly have ever been treated cloth-wise. It's got to be an area where there's no Teflon tape used anywhere
Right.
along the way, which is historically, piped open Teflon tape. You want to make sure it's not going to leak. So after you load it up with dope, you wrap it, with Teflon tape. But that, again, is a potential source of this. So,
So we just wanted to get, because those sample results are public record.
yes.
I know, if our customers see that, and they'd be like, wait a minute, you guys sent out a notice to us telling us that the water is going to be compliant.
Well, and again, I think
And
what
it is compliant from a regulatory perspective on a running average. It's just a month to month.
Right,
month
right,
session.
exactly. And if you look back at this history, which is why I brought it, the months prior to this, look, they were in that 2, 3, 4 range.
Yeah.
There's that one anomaly back in there, which again, I'd have to drill in to try to figure out, why it was there. And again, right now, we are exclusively on the Merrimack River. And as long as we don't have a major storm event, one of the things that'll foul us up in our area is a major storm event. When the Merrimack River goes from running clear to running chocolate, on top of that, we add in the stormwater overflows, sanitary, overflows from, the upstream communities, in particular, Manchester is a large one up in the CSOs.
Right.
And,
Sure.
Again, suddenly our chlorine load goes through the roof. We know the organics are high. and it makes the water tough to treat, we can treat it, but we have to up our chemical dosages.
You gotta really monitor it.
Yeah, at that
Just
stage,
constantly.
you know, and again, it's part of in our source water protection plan, we now have, you know, calibrated into storm events, travel times in the river. We've gone to some on, you know, we're putting in a, you know, organics online monitoring. So if we see them going up, you know, depending upon, you know, what's going on with Pennachuck Brook, amount of demand, we'll back off of that. Where are we with the carbon? So, you know.
It's a lot of balls in
It's
the
a
air.
lot of
Yeah.
balls in the air. You know, if we had $50 million to throw up in the air, we just put in those polishing filters and, you know, you wouldn't have to balance all those
Yeah.
balls.
Well, that's helpful because it's a lot more complicated than, you know, just the frazzle ice or whatever you call it. You know, I thought that was really the only cause of this temporary number, but you know, there's a lot more involved in that. So I'm glad you were able to describe that to us. So I think we understand that a little better. And I think if our customers ask, or, you know, maybe we can let them know, if you see this number in the file, this is the reason for it. The running average was still compliant, you know, and everything is still proceeding.
We've taken our March sample now, so that should be coming back. And I believe, you know, that was taken typically in the earlier part of the month, so we should get it back the latter part of the month. I believe at that stage, we were exclusively back on the Merrimack River. So I would expect that even though the carbon's fully exhausted, the numbers are gonna be
Because the
in the
raw
3 to
numbers.
4 range,
Yeah.
because that's the level that the Merrimack is usually at. You don't need any treatment at that stage.
That's a curious question. When they had these storm events and, you know, and issues up in Manchester, where you're getting water from the Pennachuck, from the Merrimack, do they have to notify you?
Yes, so when they have a a combined sewer overflow, they notify us. Now, I will say, you hate to use this term, the solution to pollution is dilution. We don't see increased levels of bacteria in the river water during a storm, during a CSO, because they're overflowing, you know, so they're producing in the city of Manchester in the winter, say 12 million gallons a day of wastewater. The Merrimack River during a high flow event is at thousands of millions of gallons a day.
Wow.
So it just gets totally diluted, but what comes along with that is all the particulate, the sediment, you know, everything that washes off the street. So that suddenly there's a lot of organics that are there, you know, leaf litter that breaks up, that again makes the tank, changes that water color. You know, we're less the E. coli, the fact that there's a combined sewer overflow is less concerning than everything else that comes with that.
Interesting.
But we do get notified. We're set up so that if there's a tank spill, you know, so we know where all the tanks that have oil and, you know, gasoline and various chemicals are stored throughout the watershed, where they are. So local fire department, in theory, I'll use this in theory, if one of those ruptures and there's a spill, they're supposed to call us and let us know, okay, well, if it's coming from Bosquen through the Katukic and down to the Merrimack, okay, it's going to take 9 days before it reaches here, as a for instance. So, you know, we don't need to be concerned right off, but you know, depending upon, you know, what contaminant they're serving that day, we certainly don't want to have the plant online. Now, that being said, one of the good things about carbon is it's great at absorbing organics, volatile organics, synthetic organics, naturally occurring organics, but it has a useful life. So we really, you know, if we knew that was coming down the river, we're going to shut off the river. We're going to go to Pennachuck Brook. By the same token, you know, if a truck drives off the road and drops into Pennachuck Brook and it's a 10,000 gallon, you know,
It's gonna have more of an
it's going to
effect.
have more of an impact. We're going to know that. And at that stage, you know, we would make sure that Pennachuck Brook was shut off and we were drawing exclusively from the Merrimack
Right.
River.
Right.
And we do have the ability to mix the two supplies together before it comes into the plant, or run the two independently of one another into the plant, or one or the other.
Well, it's good to know all this background because, this helps us also understand if we do want to get into a wholesale agreement, what other things that could affect the water quality too. So I think it's all kind of related and everything. So I think you've definitely answered all our questions. If anybody else has any more, if not, then
Actually, I do have one.
Yeah.
We had talked before and this kind of relates back to, Cabot Preserve. Are you still exploring servicing them from Manchester, or is that?
So Manchester has run out of capacity in terms of the fact that, in fact, when the Southern New Hampshire extension went down, that you're probably all aware of, went through Derry, down through Wyndham, goes through Salem to Atkinson, all the way down to Plastow. The state, through grant money, paid a lot of the cost of the radial wells that Manchester put in. So Manchester building capacity to serve that. We had purchased back in the early 2000s, 2.1 million gallons of capacity from Manchester. We've used 1.4 of that. With the project going on in Londonderry at exit, what's going to be 4A, I believe, the Woodmont project, they're going to use all 700,000 gallons of that. So if you talk with Manchester, their ability to produce water in particular, that's based on the peak 2 months of the year, has been fully utilized. So if we went to them and said, we want to, right now, we want to get extra capacity to switch Cabot over to Manchester, I'm not sure that they could say, okay, we have another 500,000 gallons a day or whatever they use for an average for 2 months. It's not there. We have capacity reserve, but if I bought it there, I don't have it for the developer over in Londonderry who's already purchased it. So we're still investigating that. I know the state's talking with Manchester Water about expanding their current capacity because it turns out that the PFOA contamination that was in Litchfield is even worse in Londonderry. And so there are thousands of homes in Londonderry. They project, about 1.5 million gallons a day on private wells that exceed the 20 part per trillion range, let alone the 12. And so with the ARPA money, the Infrastructure Investment Act money that came out, the state is looking at, servicing or putting in pipeline to serve almost, the half of Londonderry that's all on private wells. And what they're wondering is, where are we going to get the water from? They've talked with Manchester, they've talked with us. And then it's not only a matter of, okay, it's here or it's here, but now we have to get it over there. And what's that going to cost? In a perfect world, if Manchester had the capacity and Bedford seeing more PFOA contamination, the two pipelines would ultimately connect, and then it would be an economic decision for us in terms of stay retail with you or pay the upfront MSDC charge, which would be about $1.5 million upfront just to get water from them, and then pay their volumetric rate, which currently is about $1.87 100 cubic feet. So
Yeah, I'm not trying to push you on it. I was just.
Yeah.
You had mentioned it before and.
we're always looking for ways to try to keep the cost down. So at the end of the day, how much am I going to invest in capital, and what's the associated principal and interest on that? And in our case, is property taxes plus the purchase water cost. In your case, we have no investment in capital, but we have the purchase water cost. If I'm paying $1 more from you for 100 cubic feet of water, at some point, I can spend a certain amount of capital to get that lower rate. But right now, I'm not sure with everything that's gone on and what I've heard that Manchester has capacity to allow us to just go and knock on the door and say, hey, we're in the position that we have a plant built in the 1980s. In a pure world, if we could deliver the water there, we can get 35 million gallons a day through it. Our average winter day had gotten down to 7 million gallons a day. During the summer months, our peak summer days are hitting, 22, 23.
Wow.
So there's a lot of capacity there that obviously if we can share it with others, helps offset that large amount of fixed cost that's otherwise shared at at the lower usage pattern.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that Manchester was pushing up against the,
There, again, at this stage, the first slug of water, which was a little over 1 million gallons a day going down to southern New Hampshire, that's it. The next 2+ million gallons a day can't start flowing through that pipeline until Manchester finishes their plant to treat the water from their radial wells.
wow,
And once that, what I'm hearing is that, again, in initial discussions is that they feel that when they look at summer demand, unless they impose odd even irrigation, that they're maxed out.
yeah. Huh. Okay.
For summer
Right.
consumption.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Well, I think that's what we're all wrestling is the summer, because
I mean, I think you've seen the benefit, and I would say at some point, the concept of odd even, helps temper the flow. It comes with management headaches, but it certainly takes
Right.
some of that peak off. But the flip side of that is we always used to like, the summer months. And in fact, everybody used to have declining rate block structures to encourage people to use water. Because if it costs me 60 cents to produce at 100 cubic feet and I can sell it at $4 and I have the capacity, I want to sell it all day
Right.
long at $4.
right.
That helps build cash reserves.
Mhm.
For the summer where instead of,
When the water's there, it's no problem. You want to sell it. It's when it's scarce
Yeah.
that,
and we seem to have,
right.
in today's climate cycles
Yeah.
where, we either
It's not
have,
getting smoother.
no, it's getting wider. Yes.
Well, thanks a lot, Don. That was very informative. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Great. Good.
So the one thing, and I think I mentioned it to Keith, is that we are in for a rate case right now. So the numbers that you have were built on our portfolio at the 2018 rate case. So it's 2021. So if you took that number, I'd add 15% to it, not the fixed part of it, but the volumetric part, to get an idea of what the rate might look like, if you came out of the gate. It's gonna, that whole scenario for the cost of service gets built on your last permanent rate case. And they allow us to come in every 3 years, no sooner, no later. So it's kind of odd because they give us revenues based on that year. So our revenues right now are based on our expenses in 2018. And until we get, it'll be till 2023 before we get the next rates. But when they take effect, they will take a cost of service study. Remember I said when we have a rate increase, it's going to change the number there. So if we had a contract and we finished it before the rate case, the initial rate would be the rate that's in there if that was approved. But when the rate case came through, it was an additional 15%. That volumetric rate is going to go up 15%. So you're right, Strata, as I've told everybody, all these cost of service studies are coming in as we're initiating another rate case. So, when you take a bite at the apple, don't take a bite at the apple that's 3 years old. It tastes sweet now, but suddenly it may taste sour. So I don't want people to miss that and say, oh, that son of a gun. He pulled a Mickey on it.
Yeah, who would say that?
So, all right, well, again, I appreciate your time. If there's any other questions we can answer along the way.
Yeah, I'm sure
Let us
some will
know.
come up. I think we're all gonna take a closer look at this. Underwood has done a multiple source evaluation for us, multiple different source
Sure.
waters. This was just one of those. I think there were 12 different scenarios.
If you got places where you can
Right.
find another well, what's it look like?
And this was one of them.
Yep.
We looked at Manchester as well. Obviously with Manchester, we have the incompatibility of the disinfectants to worry about. So, you guys don't sound like you have a plan to change the chloramines?
Well, unless all of a sudden and I don't know, we were starting to do some testing. If they said, you're the one, because you have the capacity, we want you to push your water all the way to
Right.
Londonderry. And now suddenly, instead of the longest period of time to the farthest remote system in Milford is 7 days, it becomes 12 days. And the triallomethanes go from, 55 at the out, and they're suddenly north of 80. Now suddenly you're going potentially to chloramines. Certainly not our preference or hope,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we are in very much all of us in an evolving world from a regulatory perspective. Manganese is going to be particularly problematic,
Yeah,
even if we're treating for it, because they're treating it as an acute standard,
Yeah.
which means that, you get it's like bacteria, you get a grab sample with E. coli, it immediately becomes compliance and you got to notify everybody. It appears, and we'll wait and see what the final rules look like, that the state's going to treat this as acute. So if you're suddenly you go take a sample off of the discharge side of your green sand system and you see a level of north of 0.34, so you're over that 0.3, that you're going to have to notify everybody like bacteria. So, we're looking at, we have like 30 different little green sand systems where we may go only once a week. I'm sure you go more than that, is putting in continuous monitoring. So if we see it approaching that, production shuts down, you live off the atmospheric while you go figure out why what was working isn't working. Oh, we lost a chemical feed pump.
Right. Yep.
pH drop, the kinetics change.
right.
So it's not getting any easier.
Yeah.
Hey, Don,
Yeah.
Wolf here. I have a question. Did you guys by any chance look and research into like remote, like decentralized chlorination technologies? Like
Secondary chlorination stations?
Right.
So interestingly enough, where we buy water from Manchester with chloramines, you don't get any disinfection byproducts. The potential is still there, but we don't like chloramine. So a couple places we buy it remote, we go to free chlorine. So we dechloraminate and then add the chlorine. It starts the formation of disinfection byproducts, but these are little systems with a day or two as a residual. So we may hit 20 or 25 because we haven't got 15 days. We've just got a couple. We don't like chloramines because of the biofilm issues, nitrification issues. So yeah, I mean, typically we wouldn't look at boosting chlorine because if it's gone that long, it means that, if there are any organics in the water, you're just inevitably pushing yourself towards the limits of the disinfection byproducts.
Yeah.
But we do boost or convert the chloramines in certain cases. From chloramines back to chlorine.
So you don't think it's a good idea, a good practice to boost the chlorination
Well,
system?
if you don't have a lot of organics, it's not a problem. If you're boosting because there's more demand that's other than potentially the precursors for the formation of total triallomethanes or haloacetic acids, it is not necessarily a problem. You have to look at what's in the water.
Yeah.
And if you're losing chlorine residual for other reasons and you want to retain that minimum required amount, then adding additional chlorine, if I didn't have a concern for what would happen with disinfection byproducts, absolutely we would consider. And actually we did that for a while. We had out in Derry, we were purchasing water before Manchester converted. They sold water to Derry. We bought water from Derry. That was chlorinated water, but by the time it got to us, the residual was effectively zero. So we would rechlorinate at that stage in order to keep a residual throughout the distribution system. It's about of that little system that's out there, about 500-600 homes. And so yeah, we have practiced, and it's certainly, what's worse than bacteria? I mean, I often say, would you rather have a chronic problem or an acute problem? Do you want to die today or in 70 years? My preference is to extend to 70 years if possible.
Yeah.
So, bacteria is That's again, why personally I'm an advocate of chlorine. It's proved itself very effective. You know, or again, if you're like Portland Water and you're fortunate enough, you know, hit it with ozone and then give it a little dusting of chlorine and works great too.
Interesting. All right, great. I think that's it. Any other questions or
No? Good, thank you, Don.
Don's heading out the door. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good evening.
Yeah,
too.
thank you. Thanks for your time. All right, great. So we'll move on to I think the Human Resources Review with Michelle Holton was the next item on the agenda.
Yeah, back at 5:45.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do realize that we're 45 minutes off track. I can keep it short and field questions throughout the week directly from any of you via email if you prefer. We're in a solid place.
Yeah.
Both revenue side and expense side. We're 8 months through the year. 66.67% through the year. Compared to last year, our net ordinary income is almost $797,000, $376,000 more than last year. There weren't any significant expense line items that weren't areas that we've touched on. But if anyone wants to look at a particular income line item, expense line item, we can go from there, or I can run down.
I don't have any questions. Do you, Don?
I was just gonna ask about line 50108, administrative sick payout. Looks like we're at 90.7%. Is that just?
That's a one-time payout. That's
Oh,
done in
payout.
December.
Yeah.
So that is what it's going to be for the year.
I was getting confused with just sick time pay,
Okay, no,
not the payout. So
that's the
I'm
annual payout
understanding the difference there.
paid out each December.
Right, okay. I don't think I had any other questions on anything. I don't know. Any other commissioners or?
I mean, it seems like we're way up right now. Our sales up like 20% or something? Over last year?
Above last year, 19%. Our income is 518,000 over the same point last year.
Yeah, no problems.
And then, we did do a rate increase, right?
We did do a rate increase last year.
And that was,
It was 22%, but it was not every single income line item.
that's right,
So
okay.
there's going to be some blend there.
So obviously we should be expected to have more revenue because of
Yes.
the rate increase too.
Oh, that's not in the budget?
Oh, it is,
No, it is.
but we're
But it
just
includes the
comparing
rate as
this
of
year to
September.
last year. So you're saying we're 20% ahead of last year. A lot of that is because we had a rate increase of
Oh.
20%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, and the change in revenues was 518,000. But our increase in expenses is only 142,000. So we're still 376,000 net income wise, ordinary income, as to where we were last February.
Right. No, I think that's good. All right, any other questions? If not, then that's a very short and sweet presentation.
I will send out the summary, and like I said, happy to field any questions, but I can help get things a little bit more on track. Happy to.
All right, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle, for your time.
You're welcome.
I'll just say, I saw the audit. I looked briefly at it. I mean, it is what it is. I don't really have any questions for the accountants that audit our statements.
Usually, Mike Kimbo, he's the director, and our account manager. Usually he'll do a call. I was going to touch base with you. He'll do a call with the financial liaison and myself, 5-10 minutes.
Yeah, sure, that'd be
Just to
fine.
touch on the high level, and also he's happy to go into any level of detail that you want. But he usually likes to at least that piece.
Sounds fine.
Okay.
All right. Is the air conditioning on right now?
It
or
is.
is it heat?
It's AC.
It's a little chilly. We're all sitting here with sweaters on, so kind of like,
To want to keep you
do we
awake.
really need the AC on and us to wear sweaters?
It's like a casino.
I'm like, I've got a shirt on. Yeah. I want to fall asleep. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's better.
Yeah, it's off.
All right, thanks, Ron. I was starting to shiver here and I'm like, wait a minute, why? I'm looking around, everybody's wearing sweaters and pullovers. Okay.
Seen Aruba.
Yeah, right.
That's what it was.
Maybe that's it. All right, next on the agenda is an update from Underwood Engineers for ongoing projects. And we have Peter Pittis from Underwood coming in from Zoom here. How you doing, Peter?
Good and yourself?
Very good.
Yeah.
What's the good news?
Yeah, Hey, I wanted just to add one thing, because I was listening to all the presentations beforehand, and so when Dawn was talking about sampling, and then inside your sample, inside your sample lines, you have Teflon and pipe dope and all that kind of stuff. We were looking at that. When we were doing our design, and required the contractor not to use those components on sample lines, because we did not want, to have any, potential increase in readings, on the sample lines. The one thing we also asked them to, because inside a ball valve, it's a Teflon coated ball valve, right? So we are not able to find a ball valve or other valve that did not have that type of seat in there. So the ball valve does, but all the other joints do not. So
Oh, that's interesting. I wasn't aware.
so I just wanted to give you that little piece of information. So
Okay.
okay. For the update on the projects, the well 7-8 project, I believe Ron updated you on that at last month's meeting, that we were getting some increase in iron concentrations coming off of the GAC.
Yep.
We have continued to run that with not much luck of having that going down. So we had a meeting with Avoqua. So that was, I think the last one we had was a little over a week ago.
Right.
And then, so they came back and proposed, putting a calcite layer on top of the GAC, which would raise the pH and hopefully prevent, with the hope that it would prevent the leaching of the iron. We, after we had that meeting with them, because we were not aware of that before the meeting, we kind of thought about that and developed some questions. And we were putting together something. We're hoping to send it out today. It did not go out today. It'll go out tomorrow. But a letter to Avoqua asking them certain questions that we have, with that possible proposal. They also came back last week and told us that they are going to be on site setting up a pilot, on site using MVD water. That was one of the things we talked about in our meeting with them, because they were saying, well, we're, using, water that we have here. And it's like, well, that's not the water that we're treating. So, it doesn't really make sense. And they want to do a few more tests there. And then we heard on Friday last week that they're actually planning on coming out and setting up a pilot this Wednesday, out at 7 and 8. So then we'll see what's going to happen. I assume they're going to be testing out, that GAC with the calcite layer. We also would like to be testing some other things along with that too. So we're gonna, that's gonna be all in our letter that we send off to them, but that's about where we stand right now, so.
So it's a source, it's from
It's from the carbon media itself.
Yeah,
the media
Yeah.
itself, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, because, and
Go ahead, Pete.
yeah, you have the levels, Ron. I was gonna just kind of say what the levels were, raw water coming in, then what they were coming out of the green sand, and then what they were coming out of the GAC, but you probably know those, so if you want to just kind of share that.
Out of the green sand, we were right around 0.02. And coming out, and I'm just gonna use it, if it sits for any length of time, it's about a 3.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're actually we're treating less iron through our treatment plant from our wells,
Water. Yeah.
the raw water, than we're actually on our finished water going through the green sand.
And then when you run it
Oh, it's
for
higher
a while,
after
it goes
that.
It is,
down.
yeah.
It will go down to, so if you ran it for a day and you turn it on, it would, like Ron said, it would start out at around a 3, and by the end of the day, it would get knocked down to somewhere around 1.5. If you let it run for, then if you turn it off, then the next day you come back and it's back up at a 3 again. If you let it run for multiple days, the best we've gotten, I think it was down to 0.9. Is that correct, Ron?
I was thinking it was actually, didn't we get on 0.5, if I remember correctly, or
Oh, did we? Okay.
I believe so, yeah. I'd have to go
Yeah.
back and look at the data,
Yeah,
but
Brian is doing a great job logging in and recording all the levels and all that kind of stuff. So, and we've been sharing that data with the Vocus so they have it. But I'm glad that they're going to be on site using MVD water with their testing, because I don't think, doing testing in their lab is going to be.
So how long's this been going on now?
Couple months, maybe?
yeah.
Yeah, so what happened, we went online, so the GAC got delivered in January, and we started it up. And so typically with the GAC, you're gonna get a, higher pH, and then it takes a little while for the pH to drop. So with that higher pH, we were thinking that it was not really, pulling the iron off. So when we did our, took samples and brought them to the lab, everything looked good. But then as we were running, for the next few weeks, and what you want to do is you don't want to not flow water through it, because you can build up bacteria on your GAC, and then that is very difficult to get rid of. So what you do to prevent that is you constantly run water through it. So every day you run it for whatever, a couple hours or something, and that works. So the district, your workers were running it Monday through Friday, about 2 hours a day or so. And then on the weekends when people weren't there, nothing happened. Then on Monday it started back up again. So then when we were getting close to starting up, Brian ended up just taking a jar and just putting it in the stream coming out of the hydrant. And then when he looked at it, it was yellow, and that was, well, it had a yellow tint to it, it wasn't totally yellow, but, so that was, I believe, around February 10th-ish or something like that. So then all of a sudden that came up, and Brian's going, okay, that's not right, and then he started investigating and doing some testing, and then all of a sudden he says, hey, the iron levels are very high, and all this kind of stuff. So that's when it really kind of started things. And then, we're investigating. We had a couple meetings with the Voqua already, and trying to work this out. And to their credit, they actually are, stepping up and doing something instead of just saying, nope, it's not our problem. So they are doing some work for it, but we're, a little
So there's-
perplexed on where it's coming from.
So there's when it gets delivered, there's no guarantees. I mean, no,
Well, that's what I was wondering. Don't they do any quality checks on the material that they deliver, and they didn't find this? And is this happening to any of their other customers?
Yeah, so then they had one other customer that they mentioned in Colorado, you know, and we were asking, well, can we, you know, have the, you know, who is that? And so, you know, and a contact that we can talk to them and stuff like that. And then they, you know, gave us the response of, well, we need to contact them to see if they'll allow us to give out their name and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they were supposed to give that to us, and they, you know, they still haven't done that. So there's a few questions that we have asked them. We asked them at the first meeting for, you know, written responses to those instead of just verbals, and we have not received those. And at the second meeting, we had some additional questions, and we have not seen those yet. So that's going to be part of our response to them is, you noted you were going to give us this stuff, now provide it type of thing. So,
Yeah.
So, I mean, in a sense, we could have to replace the system already even before it gets used to get compliant for the iron.
If the iron doesn't come out, so the problem is we're pressing up against April, May. If we have a dry spring, everybody's gonna
Yeah.
start using water.
Exactly. I just,
We're already trying, one of the agenda items is where are we gonna get the water for the summer? Because if we're still trying to keep all of our wells that are not treated off because of the PFOA, we're already gonna be at a deficit even with well 7 and 8 on.
Yeah.
And we're not even looking like we're gonna have well 7 and 8 on for another month. I don't know.
I'm not sure. And this is what we're hoping, that's why we're glad that they're going to be on site doing that, because that's what we want to know. And we have some concerns about that calcite going in, because if that raises a pH, it really, it's not the operator controlling that, it's just the water flowing through that. So if the pH raises up higher than you normally do, that's a real concern to the operators, because that's going to be mixing with, other, water at different pH out in your system. And, that's not a totally desirable thing,
Right, and will the, I was gonna say lime, I got lime on my mind.
Calcite.
Well, the calcite will adjust the pH, but will the iron, when it starts getting, mixing with the other waters out into the system, is it also just gonna dump this iron that's being held in solution out into the system somewhere? Are we gonna get brown water calls?
It seems to me like my first thought, me, I'm a little cynical.
Get it out.
When you told me they're gonna come out there and do a test, the first thing I think is they want to do a test to prove that's not their fault. Why can't
Yeah,
you just
they've
can we
come
tell them
out
to
and
take the
did that.
carbon away and give us some good stuff?
So they
Give us
did
some
that
more.
already. They came out and did some testing because they wanted to verify the results that Brian had documented. And when they did those tests, they even brought them to an independent lab just to make sure that, we had, nobody would question the data. And the results came back fairly close to what Brian was saying. So that sort of verified that. And now we're looking at, what is a fix for it. So
So
and I'm not sure.
has anybody broached the get rid of this crap and give us some clean crap a solution?
And that's one of the things we would be talking about. Yeah.
Better do that sooner than later. if
I
we're
don't-
talking
yeah,
about
I
this.
agree.
I almost think we should give them a deadline and say, if we don't have the water, if the iron issue is not resolved by such and such a date, come here, take this carbon out and give us some fresh carbon. Although we have no assurances the new carbon's gonna be any better.
That's what I was just gonna say, we don't even have a plan for them yet, how they want to address this. So
I don't know.
if they come up with something.
But we definitely need to put them on notice. I agree with Don. That's the
Yeah,
first
Carrie
step
sent them a
to,
letter.
yeah, exactly. They have to be put on notice. That's the first step to any litigation or any other activity.
If we can't use well 7 and 8 and we have to activate well 2 and 3, then we're gonna be delivering non-compliant water for PFOA. That could put us in a violation, a running average violation of that because of their carbon, that they're too reluctant to change out,
When Wells 2's open, are they supplying the carbon for that too?
Yes.
No, that's what I'm worried about.
Does anybody else make carbon?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe we should
Yeah,
go
so-
with Calcon people.
I know.
Yeah, so we did an RSSCT, the testing on this, beforehand, and we used this carbon. This carbon was, had,
It's performance.
so, yeah, good performance in terms of treating PFAS, but it also had good performance in, having low arsenic levels, because we were concerned about, some of that, and especially at like 7 and 8, discharging that out into, the infiltration basins, and then, does that get concentrated in the infiltration basins? So this was a very good carbon in the sense of treating for both of those. We never heard of a problem with, iron being an issue. So when we were doing the RSSCT, iron really wasn't tested because there was no concern with it, along with all the other metal, we weren't, so I don't know if this came up, if this happened during then, but when we started up the well 4-5 facility, we did not see this. We saw a small spike in iron, but it did not get that, above the limit that, of the secondary, MCL. So it did rise up a little bit, but again, we weren't looking for it. So when we were doing as I mentioned, with that, we were doing at 7 and 8, after the GAC got loaded up, we were running it every day. We were doing the same thing at 4-5, but instead of doing it for like 3 weeks, we were doing it for like 5 weeks, just because, Penta was not ready to turn the facility on. So, but again, we weren't testing the iron in between there, but once we went online, then we started getting some iron levels, and, we did see a small spike, but it went right back down, and then it's been good ever since. So I'm not sure, that, when you're looking at the two facilities, you're going, okay, so what is the difference between 4-5 and 7 and 8? Is you just have, a green sand, system in between.
No, I mean,
pH levels.
it's the carbon that's different. This batch of carbon is probably.
It certainly could be, and that's one thing that they said, well, it's a mine product, it's,
Right.
It's not manufactured in a,
You said it was in
factory, so there's some
Australia,
variation.
right?
Yeah.
Comes from Australia.
Yes, it does.
It could have just been in the vein that they were excavating, or.
I'm just,
But again,
Yeah.
I don't understand how they're not, there should be like strict quality control. I mean, I would think NSF would have requirements for quality control and.
If I'm not mistaken, Pete, they're saying it's the same carbon from the 4 and 5.
Yeah, it's a different, they have lot numbers with it, so it is the carbon at 7-8 comes from 2 different lot numbers. The carbon at 4-5 actually came from 3 different lot numbers. And we actually had less carbon out at 4-5, so I'm not sure why that is. But so it's not exactly because it's not the same lot number, but they say that their test results of the 2 are very similar.
I'm just throwing it I could completely wrong, but when we're saying the differences and between 4 and 5 and 7 and 8, when it came to the tanks, were they from the same supplier of the tanks? I mean, I'm just throwing it where we had issues with,
The treatment vessels are both Evoqua vessels, right?
Yeah, they I don't think they were manufactured at the same facility, but I'm not sure which, I don't think the tank has anything to do with it, because the tank has a coating on the inside, and so you're not getting any leaching off of the tank.
Right.
Well, I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is that could there be an issue in a sense where where we had the issue where getting delivered and it got damaged and it went back and repairs? I just.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think that would be, because what we're also doing is we're testing the iron as it's leaving the green sand. So prior to GAC, we're sampling it in between the 2 GAC tanks, and then we're testing it on the effluent of the second GAC tank. And we're seeing about a half the concentration of the effluent from the second one in the, effluent from the first one. So it's roughly, getting equal rise coming out of each tank. So I don't think it has
Okay.
anything to do with the tank itself.
Oh, yeah, the one that was
Okay.
damaged, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I think we gotta give them some kind of deadline ultimatum or something and, they should already be aware of the whole issue about we're buying water now from
They're well
Pennachuck
aware of that. And
because of the vessel, when it took too, when it was damaged, it took too long to come to be repaired and all that. So they should have been aware of that. This is the same issue that we're gonna run against here is when we need the more source capacity.
Yeah.
We're gonna need 7 and 8 online. And if it's not ready to come online, then we're gonna have to activate, well 2 and or 3.
Hmm.
Or run 7 and 8 bypassing the GAC, which I don't even know if we can or not. Yeah.
When are they supposed to come start doing the testing?
They're coming on Wednesday.
I don't know, maybe give them like 3 weeks from Wednesday.
my understanding, Pete, in talking with Eric over there today, he seemed to think that they wanted to have a pre-meeting tomorrow as well, but I haven't seen anything come. I just looked at my emails a little while ago. I haven't seen anything come through from John.
And
But
that's what what was his name? Eric mentioned to me also on Friday. So I was expecting something to come in today too, that we were gonna have a meeting tomorrow. And I was busy with things all day, and there was not available to email them to say, hey, where's our meeting? So I would drop an email out to them, when I get off to get out of this meeting, and just ask them for that.
or I was just saying, can we initiate one in the morning or something for a certain time? And that doesn't mean they'll pick up the phone, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I just think, I think we got to give them some kind of a deadline to say, listen, you either have to get this system online with compliant iron so we can deliver the water. And if you can't have it done by that time, it's going to take like another 2-3 weeks for them to suck the old carbon out, to put the new carbon in, they recommission the new carbon. I mean,
Go
that's,
through all of the testing again, so that.
I
so
know,
you're-
it's,
You're kind of stuck in the middle if they can, I don't know how long this pilot testing is gonna be. I'm thinking we've done them before and about a week or 2 weeks, maybe, I don't know. Does it resolve quicker than if we were to change out the
change the
material?
media, yeah.
Exactly, so it's kind of
Yeah, because I think, Ron, weren't they giving you, if you wanted to do a media change out, they said, let us know 2 to 3 weeks beforehand, right?
yeah, that's the turnaround that.
Yeah.
But that is for regen.
Right. So yeah,
Oh.
And then, but it would,
About a 2 or 3 week turnaround for regeneration.
and it would be on our cost though.
Find a way out.
On a regen would, yeah.
Send a letter.
But I mean, to change it out.
No, this,
It'll cost us.
they're gonna come get it, they're gonna come get it and
It'll get a.
Yeah, they owe us-
Their ass.
working filters, so.
So testing wise, if they started on Wednesday, Pete, what would you think on average would they need for testing?
I'm not sure. The good thing is, at least testing for iron compared to PFAS, you can get you have test kits you can do right on site. So you can be, as you're doing some of your work, you can be getting results immediately. So I'm not sure how long it would be. I would hope that we are, within a 3-week period, we would have some results, but as they're setting up pilots, what we were talking about doing is not just say, oh, let's just test the calcite, layer. Let's test a bunch of different things in different columns. So we're running tests in parallel with each other, so we can see how's this one working, how's that one working. So then we, when we get down to the end of the testing, that we have something to pick from compared to saying, okay, let's test this one for 2 weeks, and then test this one for 2 weeks and this one for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden we're 8 weeks out, you know?
We don't
You
want
want
to
to be test them in parallel.
Yeah.
Right. All right, well, if you could definitely relay those concerns, and I kind of think we probably might want to talk to having Kerry just look over the contracts and see what other relief we have to force. Is there a deadline that we have in the contract to get this system up and running?
I'm curious what they did for the company out in Colorado, and it's kind of concerning that they're not willing to share that information or got back to.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's one of the things that we want to do is.
Yeah,
that
but-
if somebody else had
but
that,
that's-
you know.
That really is something that they can't just do. Share another business relationship with another customer. So that one, I think that they have to request that approval, that release to share that name. I think I can follow.
Is that a private customer or is it a public? Because if it's public, that's
Doesn't-
not public record, isn't it?
Yeah, but still,
A customer of Colorado could ask for all that information.
I mean,
that is true.
I mean, seriously, it's just them giving them a call. Hey, we're having an issue. Do you mind if we share that information?
Yeah, but they won't.
That should be, because who knows? They might have something they did that could fix it for us and we could be fixed.
Yeah, I feel like
That
we should
customer-
not have their attention, and the only thing that's gonna get their attention is a letter from Kerry. At this
I
point.
agree. You have to keep in mind that customer in Colorado could be a weapons lab.
Yeah. We don't even know who the customer is. They won't even tell us who the customer is, obviously. Yeah, at least if you could follow up and say, hey, you told us, you would look into this for us. I was on that call. That was like 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was before you went on vacation. When you were
Right.
on in
Yeah.
Aruba
what
was the second meeting. So the
Right.
one we had
I
that
was on the
was,
first one and they said, well, yeah, we'll get you that information. We'll have to get a release from them, make sure you can contact them. And that's 3 weeks, there's no reason why they're not responding in 3 weeks.
Or they could say, hey, do you mind giving these people a call?
Right.
If you don't mind.
I would be really curious to find out if there's a difference between the two vessels, because if the lining is damaged in any shape or form from the accident, maybe there's something leaching out there.
I still
So-
don't think the amount of
And-
iron coming out of
No.
a vessel like that would be what we're seeing here.
yeah,
He acknowledges something in the excavation where it comes out of the,
Yeah.
you
In
know,
the ash.
I just don't understand that they don't test that before they deliver it. I can't understand that.
He
Sounds-
acknowledged that it's coming out of the meat.
So he knows there's something wrong.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
whether he acknowledged, he postulated, okay, let's put it that way, I guess, but he readily said it's something he thought was coming out of the ground where it was being excavated and processed into the carbon that we get. It was in the raw, it was coming out of the ground.
Yeah, somebody needs to be bad cop with these guys.
Right.
They are definitely aware that it's unacceptable, but we do need to.
Yeah.
I do agree on the deadline.
Yeah.
By a
Yeah.
certain date, we need to.
So, worst case scenario, we tell them, hey, we need a change out. You said it's probably take 2 to 3 weeks for them to change it out. But then you have to do retesting. Worst case scenario, say if we did the change out, when would we be able to have 7 and 8 operation?
Assuming the. new
Assuming
carbon-
everything was right. Are you looking like May?
yeah, if you did that, if you said it was a 2 to 3 weeks to get your carbon changed out, and then you would send the samples out, then that's another 3 weeks. So you're talking probably a 6-week period or something, 5 to 6 week period.
Probably by end of May.
If we ask for results, we can get results in 3 days.
PFAS.
Yep.
Hmm.
It'll
So-
cost more, but
So they should be
I'm
doing,
aware that's available.
they should be doing the expedited costs on this to.
But I don't think we had to wait for the PFAS. I don't believe, or did we, Pete?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the state would do on, so the state we sent them all the data that we had, and they said, once you straighten out the iron issue, you're all set to go online.
But I would assume if we're putting new media in, we'd have to
Start all over again.
redo the
That's-
sample that we did.
That would be my guess, but I do not know that for a fact, but that would be my guess.
But I don't know if I guess remember, I don't think the PFAS sample would hold us up. I think we'd be able, if everything else came back and fine, we should be able to.
Mhm.
I think we have to wait for that.
I'm just curious, should we just say, no, let's not fool around and say, change it out? Because as it is now, by the time you're talking by the end of May,
I know, we're gonna need the water by
Yeah,
May.
even if we told them that, there's no guarantee they're gonna say yes.
yeah.
I guess that's a,
Can we get a credit for the current content of the media and instead by PFAS, goodness, by
That's
GA
right.
I know where you can buy PFAS.
by, get GAC from one of the other vendors that we have out there?
Was there
And
any
just,
other GAC that didn't have other concerns of arsenic and things, or was this really the only one?
And I would have to go back and look
Yeah,
at the
try.
RSSCT on that, to see which ones did, but we were testing, I believe it was 3 different carbons that we were testing. But this one had the best treatability for the PFAS. So some of the other ones did not, so you would have shorter bed life for those. And then if you did that, just say you wanted to go get another carbon, would you want any kind of warranty that you would be working with? That seems like it would.
So then the warranty would necessitate rapid tests, or can we already rely on the
Yeah.
ones we already have?
No, yeah, I'm not sure. If you went that route, you would probably have to go that route without a bed life warranty, if you wanted it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's all falling back on MVD, just like the dented vessel.
Yep.
I would definitely, if you're gonna have a meeting tomorrow or the day after, put that out there that, we're looking at a deadline here. If you guys don't have this rectified, if we're not running water into the system by 3 weeks, then we want you to evacuate this and bring us some new media. And, we'll even talk about, what about all the startup costs we have to pay all over again? Why should that be on us too?
Well,
Well,
we have to look if the contract allows for consequential damages or not, or if they're limited.
yeah.
Pete, do you happen to know that?
I do not have
Based
that.
on the standard contracts?
Yeah, I do not know exactly
So
what the wording is on that.
Yeah, so we need to, honestly, we need to know that before the phone call with the supplier.
It's kind of like deja vu all over again with the dented tank. All the same.
I think 7A
Well, and
wasn't meant to be.
And also you can be assured that they're watching this video as soon as it comes out. So good evening, Evoca. I hope you make this right.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe you give
They
them
will-
too much credit. All right, so any more, we want to kind of keep moving this along. There's a lot of other stuff to
Yep.
cover. But do we have a good game plan on this? I think, I don't know what else.
Yeah, we were gonna be, that was some of this, we have a list of things to add, to put into the letter. And, we will put, that wording in there that you requested.
Okay. Any other thoughts, or we can move on to other projects or whatnot?
Let's say, move on.
All right,
The well 2 project, that's proceeding along. The substantial completion date hasn't changed since the prior month, so that's a good thing. We are seeing some issues with lead times for equipment deliveries that are, might be causing some problems. One in particular, butterfly valves. They did, for whatever reason, they submitted a shop drawing in August. We approved it in August. And and we approved it, you know, conditionally that they would provide a ductile iron disc compared to, you know, the standard disc. So they did not place the order for the valves. The supplier did not place those orders. So we found out in early February that that was an issue, and that they are looking at alternatives for that. One, we looked at possibly getting a non-AIS compliant valve, because we have an AIS requirement. That stands for American Iron and Steel. And that's requirements put in there by the funding agencies. So there is a process that we have to go through, a waiver if we want to do that, but that waiver is going to take 7 weeks to get approval. So we can't give them, you know, the go ahead until that time. He placed an order for some valves that have a fairly long lead time, but he's thinking that it would be shorter. So that has all transpired in the last week or so, and we are trying to run that one down. So
You
but
guys
the-
gotta hire an expediter.
Pardon me?
You guys gotta hire an expediter.
Yeah.
Somebody to babysit these people.
Yeah, and yeah, it's hard to, you know, like, you know, on this one, you know, we did, you know, we think, you know, you approve a valve in August, you don't think that that's going to be a critical, you know, an issue,
Yeah.
you know, with the
Right.
project, right? You know, but they're like the generator, I forget what he said, you know, what the lead time on that one, but I believe that the generator is coming in, I think in August, I think it is. Isn't that right, Ron? Something like that?
I believe so, yeah.
So there's some things that are just taking some long lead times.
Are they out of the country or are they, it's just like,
I'm not sure, you know, he didn't really give us any I know like ductile
Yeah,
iron pipe used to be able to get ductile iron pipe fairly, you know, easily. You know, right now, if you go get ductile iron pipe, they're telling you 20 to 30 weeks to get your ductile iron pipe. You know, so if you're doing a water main job and all of a sudden you go out and bid it right now, you know, you open your bids and then the contractor says, okay, I'm going to start in 5 months because that's when my material is going to get here. We never saw that before, you know, that type of thing. You know, usually on a pipe job, you sign the contract, you know, submit shop drawings and the pipe's coming out there, you know, there was never a delay on that, you know.
I did hear the same thing on a project in Massachusetts for 12-inch ductile iron. They're saying they can't get it for several months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were hearing 20 to 30 weeks for submittal of or delivery of ductile iron pipe 12-inch. Yeah.
So do they still have that to install from well 9 into the plant and everything?
No, all that is on site. So that's the good part, you know, so that pipe is on site.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's really just a valve. But I was just gonna mention too, he was trying to get with, how long were you waiting for a response back from EPA? If we could.
Yeah, so when we were looking, all of a sudden when this issue came up in February, you know, one of the things we, you know, talked about, it came up at our regular monthly meeting. You know, one of the things, you know, the contractor, you know, proposed was, well, can we put this under de minimis? Because you have a de minimis part, you know, which is 5% of your total material cost, but no one item can be more than 1%. Based on the information the contractor gave us, we're at 0.8%, you know, so we're under that, so it meets it. But we need to get the approval from EPA to do that. If you went ahead and gave the contractor, you know, the go ahead to order those valves, and all of a sudden EPA said that they you know, they would not accept that as a waiver. Now you have to change those out, and if you did not change them out, you would jeopardize your funding through, you know, that would be through the SRF stuff. So you would lose all that, potentially lose all that funding. That would be the worst case scenario. Or you change, you know, have to pay to change them out at a later date, which would, cost you, material cost for the valves for the second time, plus somebody to pull out the old ones and put those new ones in. So we don't want to give them the go ahead until we get EPA approval on that. So, we talked to DES, he got us in touch with a person at EPA. And we've been going back and forth with him, every time he's asked for additional information, we're kicking it back within a day or two. And he finally came back and said, well, we looked at it, we can't make a determination, you have to submit a waiver, which takes 7 weeks. So, he said that last week, and it's like, geez, it's
Bureaucracy.
And what you had 5 weeks already corresponding there, so back and forth with
Yeah.
EPA before giving them all the information. So it's like the valves that they did have that we could have went for had it been approved. He lost those because the vendor had to sell them. He had other.
Oh,
So what was in stock is now.
someone else took them.
Yeah, it's not there anymore. So.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so John, we can't ride herd on every single item and just say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? You kind of expect them to be doing some of the stuff. And
Yeah.
like on a generator, we knew the generator had some longer lead times because we heard that with other projects. And that came up at our meetings in the fall. We were like going, hey, get your generator submittal in there because we've heard those are like 40 weeks out, So, he got it, he got it in there, we got it approved. And it's coming in August, which, the plant's supposed to be online in September. So that gives it plenty of time to, put the generator in there and connect things up. So doesn't appear to be a problem now, but everything is just coming at longer lead times. He's saying the windows, I forget what he said on the delay of the windows. So he can't do any siding on the building until he gets his windows in. So those are supposed to be coming in May. And I think the shop drawing on those got approved, I think either in November or December, so it's.
Well, hopefully he can order all the materials and I don't know if he's got room to stockpile everything, but. Man.
That's what you have to do, yeah. And that's one thing that Penta did well with the 4-5 plant. All of a sudden the pandemic, all of a sudden started coming. And then, that superintendent out there, John, what he did was he goes, I'm ordering all my stuff. And then he just started ordering everything he needed, and so, stored it, just so he wouldn't have a problem with it.
And if
that worked out well.
If it's a concern that, they order something, it gets delivered, then they got to pay for it. They hit us up to get reimbursed right at that point, right? So
Yep.
It's not
stored
like-
materials they get paid for.
not like they're waiting for payment on us and that's what's making them hold up on the orders, right?
No,
Right.
it's just, how much can you store is sort of what it is, but
Yeah.
I'd rather have it on. So right now, we had the problem with the electrical components on 4-5. Right now, we, made that as, a priority because we knew it was a problem. That appears not to be a problem with this project,
The big VFDs and everything. Yeah.
Those are, we got those approved, as fast as they came in and those are on order, but it seems like they're going to be coming in. So on that one, we approved the VFD for 2 before we approved the VFD for 9 because, we didn't have that, that part of the project awarded yet.
Yeah.
Right. So, but those are both approved and they're being made. So, those,
Okay.
from what we hear, there's not a problem with those right now.
So really the only concerns at well 2 is the generator is going to be kind of close to startup and
The valves.
obviously the
Yeah.
valve problem. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the windows are going to hold up the siding.
it is holding up the siding
Yeah.
right now. They're trying to do, as much as they can, but yeah, that's holding that up. Yeah.
Is there, what actually is going on out there at this time? Is there active construction or is everybody sitting around?
Yeah,
waiting?
there's still some interior concrete work that they're doing, some of the containment areas that they're working on. They are doing site stuff right now. The carpenter's there. He was working on some of the soffits and that type of thing and the roofing. They are looking to put ice and water shield on the roof. And then the shingles aren't gonna be there for a while. I don't even think he submitted on a shop drawing on those, Ron, right?
No,
Because he was
I
talking
think
about them.
his plan was just ice and water shield it, get
Yeah.
it watertight and start working on the interior.
Can you find out at the next meeting what equipment has not been ordered yet and see if he's willing to like order everything that's remaining, because there's bound to be something in there that's gonna be a long item and
Well, just the way the world is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, like the guy from Penta went, first thing he did was to order all his stuff, make sure that he's gonna get it.
Yep.
We gotta have this same mindset with this contractor.
Yeah, and then we would, we can check with them on that. I know there hasn't been, there's been very few shop drawings coming in the last couple months. Because, he's submitted them earlier.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if everything's been in, because I know like the vinyl siding has not come in yet and the asphalt shingles haven't come in yet.
yeah. And they're not concerned about having all this material stored and having it disappear from vandals, or anything, are they?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And there's a gate on the site that they can put up, to kind of keep people out, so.
I mean, we'll
I
put
don't-
cameras up if we have to,
Yeah.
just to, have some deterrence or something,
Yeah.
if that's an issue, but it doesn't sound like that's the cause of the problem.
He hasn't expressed that issue, no, and then also, and I don't know if he was waiting for the site to dry out, but that is a very sandy site, especially up on top where they are. Right now, it's totally dry and they can store anything they want out there now.
Yeah, that's good. All right.
Well, I think they were cutting some trees as well, so I think that was part of, they need to finish up doing some clearing to have some more additional space to store stuff.
Oh, yeah.
In the retention pond area, they can dig that as well, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So you must have like a Microsoft project scheduler schedule for all of the pieces of the construction and.
Yeah, that if you
That-
look in the meeting minutes that I send over, I don't know if Jill sends those out to you, but those are,
I can get those out.
I
Yeah,
don't
this-
want to, just asking.
No, but yeah, there's a schedule.
the schedules.
Are they
Yeah, I
following
tried
that,
to-
or are we ahead of that or behind them on that?
Yeah, so what I, so instead of tracking like each item, I'm tracking, sort of the end, we're looking at each item as we go along, but the main thing I'm looking at is when do you think substantial completion is gonna get there? Because things kind of, you get a little give and take as you're going along. And in the last month, the substantial completion date did not change. So that's the one I keep looking at as we move along. During the, what was it? I think it was the October, November, December, January timeframe. I think we lost 5 weeks in there. And that's, we were, and a lot of that was the mason taking longer than what he thought to complete the masonry work, which they couldn't do anything else until the masons gets out of there. So.
Yeah. All right.
So.
All right. Is that all the projects we had? I know in the packet here, we had a bunch of breakthrough graphs on the wells 4 and 5 vessels. I'm not sure if you were planning on talking about any of that or not, but.
I was not. Did you want to talk about that?
Nope. Yeah. Probably not at this point. I didn't, they weren't on the agenda, but they were in the packet, so I'm not really sure.
It's in the packet. I'm thinking it was just additional information type of thing.
Okay. The one question I had is on one of these graphs. I was reading the right axis, which is the percent removed. But I think you can't read the percent removed for all, on the left axis, it's concentration parts per trillion. On the right side, it's percent removed, but some of you can't read all of the lines on both axes because it's looking like it's starting out at 0% removed and going up to 90% removed. It'd be the other way around. When you're removing 100% of whichever PFAS compound, and that drops off to something less.
Right.
So I just had that question for Lynette, just to make sure that I'm looking at these correctly.
Yeah.
Because like the removal of the total PFAS starts at 100 and it drops off to something less.
Right.
But then
Yep.
the individual compounds go up.
Right. So
I
those
just want to
would,
make
so,
sure. I think what it is you just look at the right axis for the total removal.
right,
And then the left axis, you're just looking at the
concentration.
concentration.
Yes, correct.
All right, is that the way you understand it as well?
Yeah.
All right,
Yep, exactly.
that makes more sense from that perspective, so.
Yeah.
But no one's talking about when we're anticipating the need to remove and replace the media in the first vessel. What was the agreement based on? Was it like half the MCL, or I don't know what the trigger point was on the
It
PFOA.
was 2. What I just went through this with Lynette. I want to say it was 2. Was it 2 parts per trillion?
Must
No,
be higher than that.
no, I thought it was the MCL. I thought we agreed on the MCL.
That's at the midpoint?
What, the midpoint one? Or because yeah, I would have to double check, but I believe it, because that's when, you're gonna be changing out that vessel, right?
Yeah, so I thought it was in the settlement agreement, not in the agreement, but in the calculations that supported the settlement agreement. I thought there was some projections made in there. I'm just wondering with everything else going on, if we're, keeping an eye on what are.
Yeah, you're talking about the St. Gobain settlement agreement, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the bed life warranty?
Yes.
Yes, no,
Well, it should be the same.
that as well, bed life warranty, but when we're gonna change, everything looks. Bed life warranty is everything's normal with that. It's not breaking through sooner. It's actually lasting longer than it.
Yeah.
Um,
When did this go online too? Wells 4 and 5?
Oh.
Was that in fall? It was like
Yeah.
October
it was October of,
20?
yes.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, 20, yeah.
So
Been
2
about a-
years is coming up in this October.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we haven't changed it out yet?
we haven't.
Wow, that's better than I thought.
Well,
I do.
Well,
Keep in
again,
mind, it was designed for 870 gallons a minute, and we've been under that. So,
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, we're,
right. And it's just
Where-
PFOA. BFBA is broken through both vessels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're roughly, when Lynette was following it, we are somewhat just, and if you're tracking bed volume and you're tracking concentration, we were somewhere close to being even on that, but I think we are like slightly behind.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly, like, just say, concentration was like at 55%, but the bed volume was like 52% or something like that. But they were somewhat close. They were tracking somewhat close to each other, but we were slightly behind.
Yeah, so it says here, startup was in August 2020.
Yeah, we went online in October though.
Okay. All right, so I guess that's probably it as far as what was on the agenda for you, I think, Pete.
Yeah.
and as far as change out, I don't think we ever came up with it, when we wanted to change it out, I think we wanted to let them at least
We're kind of testing it, right?
keep this as a test, kind of a.
Yeah, I remember all
Let
that.
it Run as long as we can. and
Get some information and all that. Yeah, right. I had a note on here. I don't think you have anything else to cover, or do you have anything else to cover? I guess I should ask you that first.
No, yeah,
Okay. Oh, well, the next item here, if we're ready to move on, was to discuss the options to meet peak demand during the summer, this summer. I don't know if you want to participate in that or if Keith is more plugged into the demand numbers and everything,
Yeah, he's probably the one more plugged into those demand numbers, yeah.
right? I did have a note on here. There was a couple of action items that are related to Underwood on here, so I maybe if we want to, while you're here, just take that real quick and look at a couple of the action items that have to deal with Underwood's information, if I can find that on here somewhere. Do you guys, I think it's after the minutes, right?
It is.
Just to see if there's any progress or anything made or whatever on
Yep.
these. Well, probably a lot of them are more related to stuff that Keith's been working on, I think. Here. So the ones listed for Underwood Engineers is number 47, which is the review of this SDC calculation metrics. I know we're gonna have a work session coming up
April 26th.
on April 26th. I know you're gonna talk more about that. So I guess we'll just leave that. I think that's gonna be, and then also the other one was the corrosion control, which is gonna be piggyback
We're
with
gonna
that, right?
piggyback on that a little bit, and there was a couple others I read in here as well that were what was the last few that probably gonna blend right in with that as well.
Okay. The only other thing I can think of is the, we talked about at the last meeting is the columns that we're trying to put together at Wells 4 and 5.
I need to follow up with
And I didn't know if there was any progress made on
I
that.
haven't heard anything from Lynette on that, but I gotta.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did talk to her quickly on that today, and she received from, I forget the new company, but it used to be called XDD.
Right.
So they provided a description of the the test, columns, just sort of the design of that and, some and criteria. She did review that and has comments back to them. We're trying to, so like one of the, a couple of things they were looking at, setting up, 3 different columns that they would run through in series to sort of simulate the ports of the GAC. What we were looking for is instead of doing 3 of them, do 4 of them, just so it really mimics the vessels in terms of quarter way through, halfway through, 3/4 way through, and all the way through, compared to a third, 2/3, because we can't simulate that with the vessels. We wanted to have, try to, match that data there. So we were looking at doing that. What was the other thing that she was working? So there's some things like that that she was going back and forth with them on, trying to finalize that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I think at some point I'd like to run some Purolite PFA 694E resin and test that, because of the projects I'm working on in Massachusetts, that's being used way more than carbon. And it costs more than carbon, but the life is much longer. And what's appealing to me at the moment is it's a fabricated product that's not susceptible to iron contamination from digging it out of the ground and things like that. It's a tested controlled media, so, and I know you guys evaluated anion versus carbon, but
Yeah.
that's several years ago, and I don't think anion was as prevalent as it seems to be now, at least in Massachusetts on the smaller systems anyway. So
Yeah, okay.
just throwing that out there, but all right, so I guess we can move on to the next item. And Pete, if you're not part of that, and I think you're probably good to go, unless anyone has any final questions.
Well, that's some dinner, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Good for you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Peter. All right, so the next item on the agenda is for the commissioners to discuss. It's item number 3. Options to meet peak demand during the summer of 2022. I don't know if anybody has anything to offer on that.
And pretty much stuff we talked about, right? During the summer of 2022.
Yeah, well, what's going on is this summer, we're relying on Pennachuck water, which the concept was to keep all of our wells that are not treated off. So we're not putting PFAS water into the system, untreated water. We're not going to have enough water. We're well 7 and 8, 4 and 5 in Pennachuck, possibly.
Curious, our special rate, how long is that good for?
I think that goes through like till our wells are online or October.
I want to say it was next year. It was a year time.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just was curious. I mean, you know, because I know originally it was to have 7 and 8 and, you know, going. So.
Right.
So, yeah, so I guess with the coming into the summer, potentially we were gonna have 7 and 8 back online, or we were supposed to. 4 and 5, and then, like you said, operating the Pennachuck
Connecting.
as we need it. And kind of leaving 2 in reserve if that demand.
Now, if you recall, we also went through a discussion with Larry and Don from Pennachuck about building a temporary interconnection on DW Highway for any supplemental water we'd need beyond that. And the discussion at that time was, if you don't do that, you might have to take some drastic measures to reduce consumption, which basically means banning irrigation. So we may be in a position where we either need to consider restricting or banning irrigation and not activating wells 2 and 3.
It would be a temporary.
So-
we were never mandated to shut down. So this was
Right.
all voluntary. So technically, we can notify if that's direction we choose to go, we can open up and supply ourselves.
On average during the summer, how much do we could?
Well, the
consume?
point was, go ahead.
Our summer.
Well, we're pushing 5 million gallons on the peak day.
Peak day.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 million gallons in a day.
And
4.5.
if 7 and 8 are not up and being treated, we can say 1 million of it, if we continue using the Pennachuck interconnect, would blend.
Right. And I noticed on the recent samples for well 2,
Mhm.
it's down below 12 PFOA. But that's because we're not pumping it. And I'm telling you, it happens all the time. The more you pump a well, PFOA goes up. You stop pumping it, it goes back down. So I got excited, I didn't get excited when I saw the PFOA was below 12 in the raw water at well 2. Someone that doesn't know better might say, let's turn well 2 on. Within weeks, we're going to be back over the limit, and it wasn't much below 12. I think it was 10 or something like that. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, just under 10. I want to say, I get 9.
9 something, yeah.
9 something in my mind.
Could we rotate them?
We could, and
Run 2 for a couple weeks, shut it down, run 7 and 8 for a couple weeks, shut it down.
I mean, we're already gonna, that's why it's definitely gonna be critical to have to get well 7 and 8 back on.
Oh, absolutely.
Without that,
Um,
absolutely gonna be running short on something. Anyways, Wolf, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say the same thing. My understanding was that DES was actually not too worried about us being a little bit more dependent, a little bit longer dependent on 2 and 3, just
Right.
because we have a remediation plan in place, right? And that was always the statement. As long as once we exceed in 4 consecutive quarters the MCLs, we have to have remediation plans developed, which we had long before we were actually put on notice. Right. The real issue is going to be Pennachuck. Pennachuck is not going to be happy about it because that was the main motivation to go to the intermediate connection from Pennachuck, right? Because they didn't want to have that notification for Cabot Preserve. So
Right.
the question is, can we help them somehow, depending on how we run the water through the distribution system? Can we help them to keep that, to maintain that image, right?
Yeah, because the lucky for them, Cabot Preserve is on the north side of the system, which happens to be fed primarily by
Right.
wells 4 and 5.
And what's the raw in 7 and 8?
Yeah.
It's like 30.
Yeah.
Talking about blending it.
20s.
Was it, I wasn't say it was 20s, actually, I think well two was actually getting up.
Well 2 was going up. Well 2 at a couple readings was the highest of other than wells 4 and 5.
I guess the next question was, is the blending you're talking about with Pennachuck's water gonna get us under the 12?
Oh, I would have no idea out there. I don't.
Theoretically, I mean, that's all I'm saying,
Not everywhere.
not everywhere.
No, because it,
But they're very close to each other.
but all the users around, well 7 and 8, the southern side of town would get primarily that water. It would be blended with Pennachuck. I don't know. We really
And I
looked at
guess,
that.
if you look, I don't know, I'd have to, Pennachuck could have a rate anywhere from 3 to 6.
So the average of 6 and 25 is over 12. So I'd probably
Better than
say
25
no.
though.
But if that's what we gotta do, that's what we gotta do. I mean, we were planning on doing this from day one. We were planning on not having fully compliant water until
Yep.
well 2 went online at the end of the summer.
And when we were talking with Pennachuck, they were well aware that if we needed the supply, we were gonna be turning our wells on at any time.
Right. So I guess one fundamental question here is, should we be considering the concept of a temporary booster station at DW Highway? There was some cost incurred with that, involved with
I
that.
don't even.
And I don't think I'm in favor of that,
I would want to,
Well, at where we're at right now, I don't know if we'd be able to
To get
get
that ready by
stuff that we needed to,
we can't get pipe, some of that would be underground pipe we need to construct.
yeah.
We can't even get ductile iron pipe.
Yeah.
So might be a moot point, I guess.
Yeah.
So maybe that was the purpose. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that agenda item was, maybe just to have this discussion, right?
Have this discussion, so
Yeah.
we're all on the same page. I mean, I guess the way I probably would look at, if 7 and 8 are not up and running by the time the demand starts coming up, my thought would be maybe well 2 first, the lesser of the 2 into the system, and start creeping up as needed.
So again, you're still saying we can bypass, if the carbon filters are still,
Oh, I
Full of iron.
verified, that was the first thing I
we
got.
can bypass those
Absolutely.
at well 7 and 8. Okay.
Absolutely. I kind of was looking at it on Friday. Joel and I were talking and I said, I kind of threw it out there. I said, well, if we have to bypass, and I said, I think we can. I turned my truck right around, went back and I verified and we can absolutely bypass.
All right.
Um,
So basically, we'll just have to track, if that comes down to it, we'll have to track the PFOA levels in well 2, 7 and 8.
well, we're
and
hopefully,
Use whichever is the lowest.
but we just have to really,
More.
we're really gonna have to push on 7 and 8
Oh,
to
yeah,
be up and running.
I mean,
If it gets up and running, say, second week of June, that's not too bad, I mean, in a sense, because it all depends on the weather, but I mean,
I was just gonna say that it all depends on the weather. I mean, if it starts getting hot again and then in
Early in the summer.
early and I don't know if we're not in drought or anything like that, but yeah, it could change and we may need everything running and I think we'll be okay. I mean, if we can bypass 7 and 8, or have 7 and 8 being filtered, well 2, and if we, in the Pennachuck, we should be good.
Understood.
yeah, and 3, and worst case scenario, will
And we
that,
can run 3 as well if needed.
So might want to just confirm with well 3, because does the 0.3 manganese kick in, I think, this summer?
June 30, right?
Let
We
me,
should probably look into that, because the DES If they'll allow us to blend and dilute, maybe that's okay, but if they don't.
Is that a long-term exposure type thing, or is it a?
No,
You were
they're
saying
gonna
it
be
was acute.
acute.
It's acute, if, okay, that's true, then no, we can't.
Which I'm surprised, because I think in Massachusetts, the acute level.
I
is
think they were
1
gonna say acute at 0.1 and
At 1,
1.
0.3 is. In Massachusetts right now, I thought the acute was
Yeah.
1.0 and the long-term advisory was 0.3.
Well, I thought that's what New Hampshire proposed way back 18 months ago.
So I don't know if it's, I
That's
can't
gonna take
imagine
a
it's more
fine.
stringent than Mass. Nothing usually is. in New
California.
Hampshire. We probably, just make a note of that, Ron, to
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
Confirm with-
Sure on that,
somebody at DES, Brandon or whoever about,
Brandon or Mike on.
you know,
this.
if they're aware that we might need to reactivate these wells this summer because of whatever source capacity issues, if we're still facing them.
Yeah.
Well, 3 has tested above 0.3 in the past of manganese, or right up to that limit, I know.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the data. I think it was definitely higher than that. It may vary, but I don't want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I get like worst case scenario, I mean, is it something that you could run just for a couple hours, just to, you know?
Yeah, just to meet some demand, but
Well, say for, I don't know if that's possible, say for instance, we had like the odd and evens, and then we had to say from 5 AM to 8 AM. I mean, at that time frame, could we put on well 3? Just for the irrigation aspect.
it's probably gonna take more than that too, though.
Yeah.
Although we're gonna have that million coming
They're
from
saying it's
Nashville, so
acute.
that's.
I mean,
So, well, too, if we have to run that, we're at 1,100 gallons a minute. We're already better than we were in times when we were down.
We had to rely on Pennachuck. in the past.
Exactly, yeah, we were at 900 gallons a minute at one time. We're already gaining there, and if we get the million out of Pennachuck, we were only 600, almost 700 gallons a minute, so we're gaining.
So 1,100 is. Want to do the math? how
If
many
you look at
gallons?
Pennachuck is a well 3, we're getting more from that than we would a well 3, but.
Mhm.
So we're not gonna be in bad shape.
So we can get 1.5 million gallons a day out of well 2. If we can run it at about 1,100 gallons a minute.
And that's typically what it runs at,
So that's 1.5 million there, 1 million from Pennachuck, that's 2.5 million. We can get over 1 million from well 7 and 8.
What about 4 and 5?
we're
What are we up to there then? That's
just under at 4 and 5.
3.5.
I think the back, so I mean,
So we
we're
could probably
permitted
get
for 875.
4
Mhm.
million.
Or 874, but we can, that Jamie's report, that whole 625 was where he.
Like to keep us at.
Yes, yeah.
So we could, I just calculated we could probably get about 4 million gallons a day with everything with well 3 off. So. That's why our peak day if we have a 5 million gallon peak day, if we have a few of those, we're gonna be in trouble. But then we'll have to do some kind of irrigation restriction. Because I'm not a fan of building, and I don't even know if we can build, like we talked about that other temporary interconnection on DW Highway,
I think we're just asking for more headaches, quite frankly.
I know.
We'd probably miss the window. It's only that short period of time in the summer, and by the time we get it,
I know, so we'd be putting this pipe in the ground for 3 months of use, if that.
if we could get it done in time for the.
Right.
to actually use it.
Yeah,
to Actually use it. I
I never liked that idea to begin with. It just seemed like a lot of money for no long-term benefit, But, all right,
to build a pipe, I mean, if you could do it with temporary pumps and stuff like that.
something overland or something.
Overlay, exactly, that's different, but to build a pump station and,
Okay,
Wouldn't we have to get a voters approval for that anyways?
we could probably expend money out of our,
to borrow money, we
Capital
would, but out of capital reserve and stuff, no.
Okay.
yeah. All right. I think we covered that. Anybody have any other questions on that agenda item? If not, then we can move on to the minutes. So let's do that. I reviewed all the minutes. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes to review here at least. I didn't have any edits to offer on these. I don't know if anybody else does.
Could we lump them all together if
That's
nobody
what
has
I'm
any
thinking.
questions?
If no one has any edits, corrections to offer, then maybe we can approve all of them in one lump shot, which would be the minutes of January 24, 2022 regular Board of Commissioners meeting, the February 28th, 2022 regular Board of Commissioners meeting, and the 3 public hearings on February 28th, 2022. Which one of those public hearings was for the grant or the 2 grants,
Both
actually,
grants. Public hearing and.
and then the actual public hearing at the high school. So I don't think if Paul or Wolf or any of you guys don't have any corrections to these, then one of you guys can make a motion to approve all these minutes in one lump sum,
I,
if you're so
So moved.
inclined.
yeah, oh, there we go, seconded.
All right, so motion to approve all the minutes by Wolf, second by Ken. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye,
Aye. We'll do roll call with Wolf first
In favor?
and Paul.
Vote aye.
All right, I don't know if we have to be in Paul very
no, we voted.
person here, so.
Yeah.
All right, so those passed 5-0-0 on the minutes. The next item is the action items. And a lot of those are, I found that a lot of the action items are sort of, several of them are relating to what I think are the same general issues. So maybe after we have, do you want to mention the April 26th one? Because that's part of your
Yeah, the April 26th.
superintendent report. Might as well just cover that now.
Yeah.
Pertinent.
It was the last board meeting, wasn't it, that we scheduled that?
Might have even been the one before.
It may have. A work session for the chlorination and corrosion control. I believe it was the last meeting, like I said, but it's April 26th, 4:30 to 6:30. I think it was a 2-hour meeting.
I think so.
And then we were talking with Dawn and I, Tom Page and Keith were talking about how the allocations for water were being set and stuff for
Right.
Flatley. We decided to bring that kind of into this meeting because it's been on the action items for a while as well. So that is actually, we're going to tag team on that meeting at, 2 hours. We're going to do work on
The water allocation
Yes.
and the corrosion control study. So if you're looking on the action items, action item 41 was to review the process of water allocation requests from the planning board and MVD's ability to monitor. That was going to be included in a work session. I think that's the work session we're talking about doing. And then item 49 was a work session regarding corrosion control and chemical feed for remote chlorination station. That was tentatively scheduled also for April 26th. So, or that one was scheduled for 26th. The other one wasn't scheduled yet. So we
Right.
decided to just put those two together on the same April 26th
Yep, but I also think
work session.
the number 56 action item and 57 will probably fit right in there as well.
Yeah, I agree. Because I actually had those two tagged over here too.
Yep.
And that's organize a work session to discuss the new metrics for permitting based on peak consumption rather than average consumption.
And that's basically was the meeting that we originally had with Keith and Tom. Anyway.
Yeah. Last week.
Yeah,
Yes, so Ron, myself, Tom Page and Keith had a meeting about the metrics on permitting based on peak consumption rather than average consumption. So I think we can get up to speed on that at the same work session. So if you guys have that on your schedule, hopefully, if you're available, April 26th. It's a, what day is it? Tuesday, yep, Tuesday, April 26th at 4:30 to 6:30. That's a work session, so that can be done by Zoom.
4:30?
4:30, yeah,
Post it to that way,
right,
whoever wants to.
right. So if you guys can just remember and put that on your schedule, see if you can work around it as best you can. I know things always come up, but it's one we've been kicking this can around for quite a while now. I think it's been last year when this went into, one was dated July 21st that we wanted to have a work session on this. And then the one for one of the other ones was from November of last year. And I think we decided to do it after the annual meeting. That's why we put it into April. Yes, Wolf?
Yeah, you all have a knack for picking bad dates. I'm supposed to be all relaxed during that time, somewhere warm.
Oh, really?
That's okay. I'll rub it in next time you go to Aruba that I attended the meeting and you didn't.
Okay. Anyways, some of these other action items. Number 2, I think that's an ongoing one.
Yep.
I was just gonna maybe offer on here when it says ongoing, it's supposed to be done quarterly. Maybe in that last column, instead of having the word ongoing, you can maybe Amanda can also add when the next quarterly report is due to be presented in there, just so it's a reminder that, you know, when was that done last time? Is it a quarter now since the last time? I don't remember. So that might help. And I'm not sure what the date would be on that second one, when that would be due to be discussed. It's the, what is this about? The ESRs from Underwood, kind of tracking those in the budget reports.
Yep.
And also Emery and Garrett.
And I couldn't tell you if it was the last time. I want to say it was over the last couple of months.
Either. Yeah.
Went out, but
do we want to put it down for the April meeting then? If you think it was a couple meetings.
I think we should put the whole list down for the April meeting at this point.
I know, I'd like to see
getting pretty
this
far
get
down.
smaller than, it seems to be growing instead of shrinking.
yeah. I mean, it's ongoing. Yeah, I can
Meeting times.
do April meeting.
Right. All right. I don't know. I know we're running kind of late, so maybe we don't want to go through each of these. But so item number 23 and number 2, why don't you look into it, Ron, and advise Amanda when the next presentation on those quarterly things, because item 2 and number 23 are quarterly. So if you want to just let her know what to put down on those. Also, the salt mitigation committee meeting. I don't know if you want to talk to Jamie about you want me to go over anything. And I know you have some maps in here.
So, yes, I included the maps. That was from your email. Maps, the town.
Yeah, I saw that document. That was from 1984.
Yeah, that
It lists some streets and everything in there and the
salt policy, that's what I want to call it.
Yeah.
Call it plan.
That's a good find. I mean, I've been asking for that for years and I didn't know that existed. So
I think we should have a summer meeting.
I do too.
I do need to reach out to Parker Village. And I will do that sooner than later.
Yeah, there was a person, that was one of the comments I had. Somebody was asking about that. I think they reached out and Wolf had corresponded with a person out of,
And I'm not 100%. I think they were included on the original invite list. But I don't know. for sure. I can verify that as well, but or I can ask again, maybe he's
Okay,
willing to, so we do need to do that, because it wouldn't hurt, I do need to, I think we should be pushing Kyle as well, or for their plan. I know they've been actively working on it, or
right.
should have been actively working on it, and to review and all of that, so.
And now as far as the watershed signs and all that, do we get that grant? Is that set? Do we have to receive the grant before we can start working on it or working on those signs, or how does that work?
Yes, so last month was did the public hearing for the approval, so now it's going to governor and council. I don't know where that sits. I can look at that, but yeah, once we get the funding, I'm anticipating it would be something after July is when we probably get that funding, so.
Okay. All right, actually, just one other thing that's kind of related to the salt was, I don't think I've seen updates on Emery and Garrett's graphs of the minerals, the iron, manganese, and sodium chloride. I think they're probably due for an update on those graphs. So I don't know if you want to contact Jamie and just ask him. I know the problem is just everybody just flat out busy, crazy, and I am too. So maybe some of these things kind of fall off the burner, for good reason, because it's not like pressing, but it would be good to know where our sodium concentration chloride is. Because I don't think I've seen any updates for several months. And to know that before we have the next salt mitigation meeting, so we can have updated information, you know what I mean? Okay. Let's see what's next on the agenda here after action items. Looks like we have old business, new business.
I have some quick new business. I kind of both. Where do we stand with the annual review for the superintendent?
Yeah, that's a good question.
That's going to, excuse me. Dawn, I spoke to you earlier, probably about a couple weeks ago, that you wanted to see if you could sit in on it. I did reach out to,
Are you talking to?
reached out to,
I don't know why it would be me.
You said me, right, Paul? This is Don.
yeah, Dawn.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you said John. That's why we were confused.
I thought I heard Ron. I was like, I'm gonna be there anyways, but.
I'm a little hoarse. So I reached out to Carrie about that, and she said if anybody did want to sit in on it that wasn't the personnel liaison, then it would have to be like a public meeting. So I don't know if you wanted to pursue that or if that mattered to you at all.
Even with just two.
I mean, that's what I got.
No,
Was Michelle was the one that pointed out.
Ron's not a commissioner, so that wouldn't affect.
Yeah. I'm getting a little confused on that. And that with the
Talk to Carrie.
Because that's one of the reasons
Seriously.
personnel you've been having on public, so.
right.
What would the difference?
The
be?
same thing with the event policy. If there's only two commissioners, I don't see why that, but
That's
I don't
what,
know.
so I can get clarification from her. I don't know if it. I don't know. I can get clarification from her on that, but other than that, Ron, I'm ready to have it anytime this week or next week.
Okay.
all right. Yeah, can you clarify that from her?
Yeah, I'll ask her if it was just, so I had only mentioned you, and she said if it was just you and me, then it would have to be a public, but I can get clarification just in case she thought that I meant
More
I
than,
don't know, the
yeah.
entire.
Because I was always under the impression a public meeting is only required if there's a quorum of commissioners present.
Hmm.
And we had negotiations with St. Cobain with only Wolf and I to specifically avoid having to necessitate a public meeting. So I don't know. Yeah, if you can clarify that and I can try to make myself available too. I'm not going on any vacations or anything, so should have free time. And it's probably good to do it before summer comes in because everybody's gonna start taking time off too.
Oh, I wanted to get it done before the end of this month, so,
Okay,
well, it'll be,
okay.
Right.
Any other new business items?
No, but just a comment, I agree, this really needs to be done because we have a backlog with, there's some financial implications there and they're either gonna create a hit, right? Because I don't think we have created any reserves on the books, or somebody's gonna be negatively affected by it. So this really needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Thank you. I did find out from Jamie that the well 9 report will be going into to NHDS early April.
Okay.
Actually, last week they were doing some additional surveying and stuff, I think, up that way.
Okay,
Avoca plans on being on site this week. Wednesday, tentatively scheduled for Wednesday. And again, I'm gonna try to, there's supposed to be a meeting. My understanding was gonna be a meeting tomorrow and we'll get that. I met up with Jennifer Harfman from NHDS on March 2nd. Glasses on, so I can't read my writing. For PFPRA testing. She did pass on the Eurofins results. And as soon as she gets the results from US EPA, she'll pass them along as well. You know, that was one thing we on the action items was to get Brandon here. So that my plan is once we get the additional results, I'll get Brandon to come in and when he's available for a board meeting to go over that. I did reach out the ASTR.
oh, ATSDR.
Thank you. Did not reply. But I did go online as well to research it. I haven't been able to find anything on it, so I'm.
Yeah, that was whether they had, what do you call them? Like, exposure limits for other PFAS compounds,
Right.
PFBA or and all these other ones posted yet. Okay,
I mean, I specifically looked for the PFPRA, but I didn't see anything, but
yeah.
I can expand my search on that one as well.
So we do have test results in our packet here for PFPRA. And it looks like MVD water untreated was 4.8, treated was 3.8.
Yep.
Pennachuck water at the interconnect was 2.4. And then Lorraine Allen's residence was 3.3 and 3.4. She had previously tested the water and had a lab report that said that it was 40 parts per trillion.
Really?
That's PFPRA, which is not even a compound that's routinely tested in the 25. This is the expanded testing for like 80 something parameters or something. And I think that was all that I'm aware of that was done in MVD water.
Yeah, we did 4 and 5, and then we did the interconnect.
So I guess we tested PFPRA previously at wells 4 and 5, and it was like between 7 and 8 from the last time it was tested. So this testing was to reconfirm, well, especially the 40, because where did that come from?
Right.
That's pretty high. But again, this PFPRA doesn't even have any exposure profiles or, any health profiles for it yet. And it's not a regulated compound, so there's really not a lot of information out there. But yeah, so that definitely addresses that, I guess. So, yeah, the salt thing that was that letter that you had found, the policy back from 1984 was, that was a great find, and I think this specifically lists roads that were classified as no salt roadways. They go through the whole process on what determines what type of de-icing you apply, whether it's salt mixed with sand or just salt, straight salt. And I'm sure there's been a lot more roads created in Merrimack since 1984. So hopefully this list is something that PWD started with and has expanded upon. You must have got this from Kyle or not? Where did you find this?
This was, I've had this in the file for a while, so I,
Oh, all right. I
Yeah.
thought you would go, I thought you went snooping around at the town hall and found it or
no,
something.
no,
Downstairs in the basement.
In the archive. Yeah,
No.
okay.
I'm thinking I got a call for me.
I had to dig it out, but I had it here. But I don't remember if Kyle had given it to me or if it was on file here from. And it's something I came across in our files, but
All right, well, that's good. Well, we'll take a look at it and it'll come in handy for the next work we're doing with the salt mitigation. So at this time, just to see if there's any questions from the press or public. I don't know if anyone
Actually have
can
one
tell.
more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. This one's, I did speak with Barry Miller today. He's actually gonna be here tomorrow to clean and surge 7.
Oh, beautiful.
7.
Good.
So, and he uses the crane for that one, so hopefully the schedule works out, that can go somewhere else, and he can bring in his regular boom truck and do 8 as well. But it may not fall, right after 7, it may be the week after, but
Good, that's good timing because we're gonna need those wells one way or the other, whether they go through the
Something's working out.
PFAS treatment or not. All right, is that it?
yes, yeah, that was
Great,
it.
thanks. Can you tell if there's anybody on the line that has an opportunity? If there's anybody out there that has any comments or questions from the public?
That says 5 participants.
Or the
That's
press.
5 of us.
All right, seeing none. Then I just want to let everybody know the next regular meeting is April 18th. Of course, we have the annual meeting Tuesday.
Yep.
And with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Seconded.
Motion to adjourn by John, second by Ken. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Hey.
Aye. And a roll call with Wolf
In favor?
and Paul.
Vote aye.
Great. The meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Merrimack TV. See you next month.